Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
Big Sam presents Raw.
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents
I make this for you.
It's Big Sam presents Raw.
We call the calendar. Everybody's ready for trial for the hearing. Will the state of Georgia call that first witness?
Judge, before I do that, if I can make some introductory remarks and comment on some of the things that the court has done, with your permission?
Certainly.
I would also note that, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you cannot interrupt and sit down, Mr. Counselor. Thank you. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I have a motion pending before the court.
You may argue that later. Okay, go ahead.
Judge, this is, as you noted, the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan. I note for our record, because we need to make a record here, that we have two of the defendants who are seated in the courtroom, it would appear, at the Glenn County Adult Detention Center. One of them is off camera at the request of defense counsel and with waiver. We do have one witness from the state's perspective that we intend to call in just a moment. We are here from the Cobb County District Attorney's Office on behalf of District Attorney Joyette Holmes, who's seated behind us, and we are representing the state of Georgia based on the Attorney General Chris Carr's order that appointed us as the special prosecuting agency on the case. So I wanted to make a record as to who we are and why we're here. I am Jesse Evans, and I am the major crimes prosecutor for the Cobb County DA's office, and this is Linda Dunikowski, who's here with us today to handle this. As you noted, Judge, due to the statewide judicial emergency issued by the Supreme Court, we have followed the court's guidance and wore our masks into court today. We appreciate the fact that in order to make a record and for a court reporter to take things down, it might be necessary as we're speaking to remove those masks temporarily, as I've done now. And we appreciate the court understanding that that's sometimes required, even despite the Judicial Emergency Act, so that we can make a proper record in these proceedings that were requested by defense counsel and by the defendants in this case, not by the state. We have come here today for the purpose of the probable cause hearing, and this preliminary hearing we're prepared to go forward, as the state has said. They are essentially challenging the probable cause for the issuance of certain arrest warrants for the defendants in this case. We have no objection to one of the defendants not being present virtually or in court due to the request of counsel and the fact that they've expressly set a waiver here. Though we acknowledge the fact that had they insisted on the presence, we could certainly have made accommodations so that he too could be remotely, for lack of a better term, zoomed in or Skyped in, whatever this technological system is. Today, though we're acting as the special prosecution in the case, we're here essentially on behalf of the citizens of Glenn County to talk about the fatal shooting of the February 23rd incident involving victim Ahmaud Arbery, who was chased, hunted down, and ultimately executed. We believe the evidence will show based on what's about to be presented to the court. That's our purpose for being here today. I will tell the court that yesterday during a status conference involving the lawyers, there was one of the defense attorneys for defendant Bryan that articulated some speculation as to how this court might rule on some things, which was a little bit troubling from the state's perspective. Other than yesterday meeting face-to-face, that's the first opportunity we had to meet you, Judge, and we appreciate the professionalism that you've shown us and the courtesy that you've shown us here in Glenn County. But I did want to at least state for the record, since the record was silent yesterday, that we were concerned about that articulation. We don't know what the basis for that would be, but we're certainly ready to go forward at this point. We believe this court to be a reasonable court by all of our dealings with you to date. And we're prepared to call our witness and defend our probable cause for the issuance of these arrest warrants here. But I wanted to make those prefatory remarks and also articulate for the public that may be watching why it is that there might be times that we do not have our masks on. And it is important in these criminal matters that we make records and that we have court reporters take those things down, and sometimes it's easier to do that when the masks are temporarily removed. So I didn't want to be silent on that point in the face of the national and worldwide crisis that we're dealing with this pandemic.
Thank you.
With that, Judge, absent any other remarks from any other counsel at this point, we call Richard Dial from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to the witness stand.
Raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
All right, so thank you for removing your mask for purposes of making the record, but I'll ask that you keep it handy. If there becomes a point in time where you're no longer testifying, then we may ask you to put that back on while you remain in the courtroom. Understood?
I do. Yes, sir.
To the degree you're able, I want you to use the microphone beside you so that we can make a good record and so that everybody can hear you. First of all, if you will, introduce yourself to the court. Spell your first and last name for the benefit of our court reporter.
Certainly. I'm Special Agent Richard Dial, R-I-C-H-A-R-D. Dial is D-I-A-L. I'm Assistant Special Agent in charge with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation assigned to the Kingsland Field Office, which covers Glenn County.
Have you been tasked with being the lead investigator on the investigation involving the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery from February of 2020?
Yes, sir. I'm the case agent.
Before we get into the facts supporting your arrest warrants that were issued in this case, will you please articulate briefly a little bit about your background that allows you to serve as an investigator with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations?
Certainly. I was hired as a narcotics agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in 2001. I was subsequently promoted into a special agent position. I have been with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation that entire time, which is approximately 19 years. Throughout that time, approximately 17 years of that, I've been assigned to the Region 14 Field Office, where I've worked a variety of investigations.
In this particular case, you're not the only agent working on the case from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Is that accurate?
And that's correct. There was a team of agents assisting me in the investigation.
And as we sit here now, can you confirm for the record and for the benefit of the judge that while arrest warrants have been issued, there are certain aspects of the case that continue to be under investigation?
That's correct, sir. It is still an ongoing investigation.
I have copies of the arrest warrants in this particular case for the defendants, including the two McMichaels as well as Mr. Bryan. Are you the affiant who swore out those affidavits for arrest for these defendants?
I am, yes.
And if I am correct, the date of the offenses that we are here to discuss today are February the 23rd of 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And just to get past these basic background information before I open it up to you for the facts, will you confirm that you have arrest warrants charging Travis McMichael with felony murder based on aggravated assault as well as aggravated assault?
I did, yes, sir.
And then can you also confirm that Greg McMichael is charged with felony murder based on being party to the crime of aggravated assault as well as party to the crime of aggravated assault?
Yes, that's correct.
And then finally, chronologically, the last warrant that was obtained by you and your agency is against William, sometimes referred to as Roddy Bryan, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
And those warrants charge him with felony murder and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The location of the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery in this particular case, what is that essential cross-section of those streets?
It's going to be Holmes Road and Satilla Drive. That is in Brunswick, Georgia, in Glenn County.
Holmes is H-O-L-M-E-S, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Satilla, S-A-T-I-L-L-A, for the benefit of our court reporter?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And can you confirm for me that that is in Brunswick and in Glenn County, Georgia?
Yes, sir, it is.
Today, you have a monitor in front of you. Do you see two of the defendants present virtually?
I do, yes, sir.
And they have masks on, but do you recognize who those two are?
I do. Travis McMichael is seated on the left in a striped shirt, and Greg McMichael is in a jacket and tie, seated on the right.
Okay. All right, I want to ask you some questions about when you got involved in the investigation.
Yes, sir.
First of all, was the GBI asked to be involved with this case at the outset, or did that come about later?
No, sir, that came about later.
Can you briefly articulate, for the benefit of the court and for our court reporter, how that is that you came to be involved in the investigation and why that was delayed somewhat?
Certainly. This case was originally investigated by the Glenn County Police Department. Subsequent to that, the district attorneys recused themselves for this circuit. Another district attorney was assigned, then that district attorney recused himself, and it was assigned to a third district attorney. My agency on May 5th, 2020 contacted that district attorney, offered our assistance. The district attorney was Tom Durden, and we offered our assistance. He availed himself of our assistance and requested us to become involved in the investigation. And then on May 6, 2020, I was contacted and assigned the investigation.
All right. You've had an opportunity now to review Glenn County's initial response to the shooting, correct?
I did, yes, sir.
And I assume you've talked to witnesses and had your agents talk to witnesses in support of the arrest warrants that you obtained in this particular case.
Yes, sir.
Briefly, I want to talk about the deceased victim in this case. Will you tell the court what his name was and a little bit about his background?
Certainly. His name was Ahmaud Aubrey. He was 25 years of age. He was a resident here in Brunswick, Georgia. He lived at 140 Boykin Ridge Drive at the time of his death with his mother. He was involved in athletics, liked to play games outside. He liked to run, liked to play video games.
As part of your investigation of this case, were you able to determine the approximate distance from Ahmaud Aubrey's home to the place where he was fatally shot on Satilla and Holmes?
Well, yes. I actually took a driving measurement from his residence to where the house under construction was located, which is at play in this investigation, and that's located at 220 Satilla Drive, and it was approximately 1.8 miles. The scene of the shooting is a little further down the road, approximately 2.5 miles would be my estimate.
I want to ask you some more background information now about the defendants in this case, and we'll start with Travis McMichael. Travis McMichael, were you able to determine what his age was?
I was, yes. Travis McMichael, he is 34 years of age. He resided with his father, his mother, and his sister at 230 Satilla Drive in Brunswick, Georgia.
And did he have some prior training in the Coast Guard?
Yes. He served in the Coast Guard as a boarding officer who's involved with the interdiction of vessels. He had training reference to that, and that's the position that he held.
You had mentioned that he lived on Satilla Drive with his father. What is his father's name, please?
His father's name is Greg McMichael.
How old was he at the time of the commission of these crimes?
64 years of age.
And did they live together?
They did.
Can you tell the court a little bit about the background of Greg McMichael, the father in this case?
Yes, Greg McMichael is a retired investigator with the Brunswick Judicial Circuit. He served in that position for a number of years. Prior to that, he served as an officer with the Glenn County Police Department. He also served as an officer with the Brunswick Police Department and with the Department of Natural Resources for a short time.
I want to ask you, was he an officer for some period of time with the same agency that was initially called upon to investigate the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Aubrey?
Yes, he was. He was an investigator for a number of years with the Brunswick Judicial Circuit and actually retired as an investigator from the Brunswick Judicial Circuit, which was one of the reasons for their recusal of themselves from the case.
And specifically, did he at some point in his background also work for Glenn County Police Department?
He did, yes, sir.
I want to turn our attention now to the third defendant, William Roddy Bryan, and ask a little bit about his background. Can you articulate for the court where he lived and a little bit about his age and his background?
Certainly. William Bryan, he resided at 307 Burford Road, which is in the same housing area, the same neighborhood as Satilla Drive. He's 50 years of age. He was employed as a small engine mechanic at the time of this incident.
Before I turn our attention to the actual date of the crimes in your arrest warrant, I want to talk about the Satilla Shores neighborhood. Are you familiar with it?
I am, yes, sir.
And you had already mentioned on your direct examination previously reference to a home that was under construction. Can you please explain to the court the significance of that home and where it was located?
Yes, that residence is at 220 Satilla Drive. It belonged to a gentleman by the name of Larry English. It was a home under construction. I believe Greg McMichael, in one of the interviews, refers to it as a shell of a house. He was in the process of constructing his home. As you go into Satilla Shores neighborhood, you go down a short way and it's on the right. It's as you come in. This home is important in this investigation because the deceased victim in this investigation, Ahmaud Aubrey, had been seen inside that home on security camera footage prior to the shooting incident. And on the day of the shooting incident, the neighbor had seen him inside of the home that's under construction and had called 911 prior to the rest of the events taking place.
Focusing now on that home, you said that the home was under construction. Was it secured or unsecured at the time of the shooting?
Unsecured.
And when I say unsecured, describe for the court its state.
The upper walls of the house and the windows were in the house. There are no interior walls, it's studs. We did have this from the security camera footage that shows the interior of the residence. There was no garage, or does not appear to be there was any garage doors on the house, which is actually attached to the house. In the video, we couldn't tell if it had a front door or not, but it's very obvious that individuals were able to walk through there without being impeded in any way.
In fact, have you found as part of your investigation other videos showing other people that walked through this unsecured residence at different times?
Yes, sir. Besides Ahmaud Aubrey, we have discovered video of at least 2 other groups of people that have been inside the residence with the interference construction.
Was anyone living at that house at the time of this crime?
No, it was going to be a vacation house that was under construction. There was a small trailer in the backyard, which was secured, but for when the owner, who resides in another county, would come and work on the house, he'd have a place to stay. But it's been under construction for quite a while.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was anything ever taken from this house based on the video footage that you've seen?
No, I think there were some kids in the neighborhood, I believe, took a couple pieces of wood from the house. But that was on video. But other than that, no. There's nothing I saw in the video, nor that Mr. English has told us during interviews he can say was taken from the house.
And has the owner been interviewed by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
Yes, he's been interviewed at least 2 separate times by 2 different agents in reference to this case.
You had mentioned that Mr. Aubrey was an avid runner. Is that accurate?
It is.
And have you talked to multiple people, you and your agency, who confirmed that running was one of the things that he did for
Yes, sir. Very much.
For health and for just his mental state?
Yes, sir. He just enjoyed running, is what we're getting from numerous witnesses and the family and friends of his.
In conversations with the homeowner of this house under construction, was there ever any discussion with him about water sources that might be there if somebody wanted to get a drink of water, say, during a run?
I'm aware that the homeowner, Larry English, or through his attorney, has made statements concerning their speculation that there are water sources at the house, and that could be a reason for Mr. Aubrey's entering the house. That is not captured on video, but I'm aware of that statements that they have made.
On the date in question, now turning to February 23rd of 2020, you had talked about video. Is there multiple sources of video surveillance that's been reviewed from the Satilla Shores neighborhood from which we were able to piece together a timeline of what happened?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Different locations, not just this house that you referenced?
No, yeah, there's different locations. Neighbors and other sources of video we have that help show the events that occurred.
All right, I now want to direct your attention to specifically February the 23rd of 2020, the date that is the subject of your arrest warrants for the 3 defendants in this case. Were you able, looking at all of the evidence and speaking to all of the witnesses, to piece together a chronology of how Ahmaud Aubrey came to be shot at Satilla Shores?
Yes, sir, I have.
Would you briefly and succinctly articulate for the court what it is that you were able to piece together from your investigation in this case?
Certainly. From the surveillance video across the street from the house that's under construction, you see Mr. Aubrey coming up to the house, going directly into the house. From the interior video of the house, you see him just wandering around, again, not taking anything. He's just walking around, looking around inside the under construction building. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Albanez, you can see him on the video coming forward, and during interviews with him, he saw Mr. Aubrey going in the house, so he calls 911. At that point, the call is dispatched, and during the call, it's actually logged as somebody's in an open construction site. So Mr. Albanez sees him in there. From the video, you can tell that Mr. Aubrey comes out of the residence, and goes running down the street. From the interviews conducted by Glenn County PD, and you can actually see it on the video, Mr. Greg McMichael was in his front yard. You don't see him, but you see he says he's in his front yard working on some cushions for his boat. When he sees Mr. Aubrey running down the street, during his interview with Glenn County PD, he doesn't say, he says that he didn't know if Aubrey was chasing somebody or somebody was chasing him, but he recognized Aubrey from previous video he had seen from February 11th as somebody that was inside this house that's under construction.
I want to talk about that previous video since you broached that topic. Did Satilla Shores have a Facebook page during which residents were talking about that property and other things?
Yes, they did.
Did you find any discussions about the fact that somebody may have been in that residence previous to this?
Yes, there was some discussion about it on the Facebook page as well as on the February 11th report that was filed by the officer who responded to the person in there. He makes note that the person's information was on that Facebook page.
And now getting back to the chronology of February the 23rd of 2020, articulate for the court what your investigation revealed in terms of Mr. Aubrey running past the McMichael's household.
Okay. Mr. Aubrey proceeds past the household. He's running down Satilla Drive south. Greg McMichael goes inside, according to his statement and Travis McMichael's statement, tells Travis McMichael that the guy's running down the road. They both grab their weapons. Greg McMichael arms himself with a Smith & Wesson 6.86 .357 Magnum revolver. Travis McMichael arms himself with a Remington 870 pump 12-gauge shotgun. They then enter Travis McMichael's truck. Travis McMichael is driving. Greg McMichael is in the passenger seat. This is according to both their statements. Then on the video, you see them come out of the driveway and turn in the direction that Ahmaud Aubrey was running.
I want to pause there at this point. You had mentioned a previous 911 call involving the residence that was under construction, correct?
Yes.
Were either of the McMichaels the 911 caller for that initial call about the structure?
No. The person that called was Matt Albanese. Neither Travis or Greg McMichael has called 911 at that point.
And that's what I want to be clear on. So my follow-up question to you is, when the defendants, the McMichaels, armed themselves with this revolver and shotgun, did they make a 911 call before going after Mr. Aubrey?
No, sir, they did not.
So there's no 911 call initially by them as they gave chase?
That's correct.
Can you describe the vehicle that the McMichaels were in?
Yes, they were in a white Ford F-150 2019 model that belonged to Travis McMichael.
Per statements of the defendants and video that you reviewed, can you articulate for the court whether there was any time in which the McMichaels were able to catch up to the deceased victim in this case?
Yes, according to both their statements, and we have video of them, they called up with Ahmaud Aubrey as he was running. He actually runs down Satilla Drive. Satilla Drive takes a turn, but if you continue straight, it turns into Burford, which is the street where Mr. Bryan resides. They catch up to him. According to Travis and Greg McMichaels, they're giving commands to Ahmaud Aubrey to stop. This is captured when this is going on. Mr. Bryan is outside of his residence, and he has a surveillance video camera that captures this shooting down his driveway. So you see Travis McMichael's truck and Ahmaud Aubrey in his driveway, and according to Mr. Bryan's statement as well, he sees them trying to pursuing Ahmaud Aubrey. In the video, you actually see Ahmaud Aubrey trying to get away. He's running backwards. The truck would move backwards, and he's moving forward. He's trying to escape at that point in the video. According to Mr. Bryan's statement, he does not know Travis McMichael. He has met Greg McMichael, but he didn't recognize Greg McMichael at that time because Greg McMichael was in the passenger seat of the truck. But he recognized the truck as a truck that's in the neighborhood. So then he yells, "Do you got him?"
When you say he yells, "Do you got him?" who are you referring to?
Bryan is yelling to the person in the truck who he doesn't know. He doesn't get a response. Mr. Bryan, his statement, then goes into his residence, gets the keys to his truck, comes out and cranks up his truck with the intention of assisting in the pursuit.
So at that point, Roddy Bryan makes the decision to enter his residence, correct?
Yes.
get his keys?
Yes.
And then what kind of vehicle does he get in to join the pursuit of Mr. Arbery, the deceased victim?
He is in a 2018 Chevy Silverado gray in color.
At this point in time, based on our best evidence, has any 911 call been placed by either the McMichaels or the Bryan?
No, none have.
Can you describe as best you're able, I know it's a convoluted situation, we're going to get to a map in a second, but describe for the purpose of a record the best you're able, the sequence of events thereafter as these two pickup trucks at Satilla Shores are chasing Mr. Arbery.
Yes, Mr. Arbery continued heading down Burford Road away from Satilla Drive. Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael are following him. Again, Mr. Bryan is then getting his keys and getting his vehicle cranked. At one point, Mr. Arbery turns and goes back the way he was running in an attempt to avoid the McMichaels. Greg McMichael, who had been riding in the passenger seat of Travis McMichael's truck, he's actually sitting on a child's car seat at this point. He exits the vehicle with the intention of confronting Mr. Arbery. Mr. Arbery is running back down the road at this point. According to Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael's statement, Greg McMichael comes back to Travis McMichael's truck and tells him, go back, back up, trying to encourage Travis McMichael to back the vehicle up and engage Mr. Arbery. At this time, Mr. Bryan is coming out of his driveway, and his vehicle was actually backed in his driveway. So the front of his vehicle is facing the front of his driveway. So when he pulls out on the road, he sees Mr. Arbery coming, and he pulls his vehicle out in an attempt to block Mr. Arbery in. That's according to his statement, as well as Travis McMichael's statement. At that point, Travis McMichael makes a decision. He tells Greg McMichael, no, jump in, and his decision is to circle around Buford Road, because it circles around and actually becomes another road, Zellwood, but it circles around, and his intention is to get and cut off Mr. Arbery where Holmes Road cuts into Satilla Drive. And it's just wants to make a loop and cut him off from that way, if that makes sense. So Greg McMichael hops into the back bed of the truck because of the car seat situation, and they then go and start circling around the block pretty much to cut him off. At this time, like I said, Mr. Bryan has pulled his vehicle blocking the road trying to block Mr. Arbery, and Mr. Arbery goes around his bumper, his truck. According to Mr. Bryan's statement, he then pulls down the road and makes several more attempts to try to block in Ahmaud Arbery, trying to detain him.
I want to ask you a couple questions before we leave this point.
Yes,
At this point, have the two trucks separated from each other?
Yes, sir, they have.
And you had mentioned Mr. Bryan's statement to you all. Did he talk about his attempts to sort of run Mr. Arbery off the road or push him off the road using his vehicle?
Yes, he made several statements about trying to block him in and using his vehicle to try to stop him. His statement was that Mr. Arbery kept jumping out of the way and moving around the bumper and actually running down into the ditch in an attempt to avoid his truck.
At various points during this chronology that you're articulating for the court and our record, based on the evidence you've seen, including some video footage, were you able to determine that using these two pickup trucks during the whole event, Mr. Arbery's path of travel was essentially redirected by the actions of the defendants?
Yes, sir, very much. Mr. Bryan, so Mr. Arbery gets, if I can explain.
Sure.
That's okay. Mr. Arbery goes around Mr. Bryan's truck as he's pulling out. At this point, Mr. Arbery is heading back the way he's come, which would lead him out of the Satilla Shores neighborhood. Mr. Bryan makes statements that he continues to try to block in Mr. Arbery. Mr. Arbery takes a right turn onto Holmes Road, and Mr. Bryan is actually overshoots him going Satilla. So at this point, Mr. Arbery is trying to avoid Mr. Bryan, and he turns down Holmes Road, which is actually going sideways back into the neighborhood instead of out, which is the way he was traveling. Mr. Bryan then remaneuvers his vehicle and pursues Mr. Arbery down Holmes Road.
I want to be clear on that point. As you go down Holmes Road, had Mr. Arbery been allowed to finish that path of travel, was there any direction that could be made to get back to the exit of that neighborhood?
Yes, if he went down to Holmes Road, he could have caught Zellwood and then gone back up again to Satilla Drive and going back out Satilla Shore. So pretty much he could have gone straight, but he cut and would have had to circle back around. But he could have still escaped the neighborhood at that point.
At some point in time, I know that a video was started by Mr. Bryan. Is that accurate?
That is, yes, sir.
And he's confirmed as much, and we have copies of that video from his cell phone, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
There's been portions of that video that have been played widely on television, but there's actually other portions to that video as well, correct?
That is correct.
Can you please articulate for the court what you were able to see and confirm with Mr. Bryan about what he did as Mr. Arbery was heading down Holmes Road away from Mr. Bryan's vehicle?
Yeah, so Mr. Bryan's pursuing Mr. Arbery down Holmes Road, again with the intention of trying to catch up to him and block him in. At this point, while going down Holmes Road, Mr. Bryan turns on his cell phone camera and begins to try to videotape Mr. Arbery. Mr. Arbery stops. Now at this time, the McMichaels have turned off of Zellwood and are coming down from Holmes Road. So you've got one vehicle coming one way down Holmes Road and another vehicle coming another way, and Mr. Arbery is in between them. So at some point, Mr. Arbery turns around and starts heading back towards Mr. Bryan. Based upon the statement, it appears that Mr. McMichael is coming. Mr. Arbery's running, sees Mr. McMichael's truck, and then turns around and runs back by Mr. Bryan's truck. Mr. Bryan gets out of the way as Arbery runs past him, and then he sees the McMichaels come forward. Now, at this point in the video, Mr. Bryan has put the video down, so you don't have video of this sequence of events. But this is according to Mr. Bryan's statement that Arbery runs past his truck, then the Bryans come past his, then the McMichaels come past his truck. Then Mr. Bryan pulls out and again goes back down in the direction of that Mr. Arbery had traveled.
Before we leave this topic here, was any of this captured on the video before the phone was put down? Could you actually see Mr. Arbery trying to evade the truck?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay, and did you see him turn around and try to get away from the truck before it turned around? I'm referring obviously to Mr. Bryan's truck.
Yes, sir.
And I know that you just said that the video was put down at some point and you couldn't see, but were you able to capture any audio?
Yes, you can hear the different gears changing in the engine, moving in the vehicle. Yes.
All right. And then along those lines as well, during the portions of the interview where Mr. Bryan was interviewed both by Glenn County Police Department and members of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, did he make any admissions to you that his vehicle had any contact with the deceased victim and any damage as a result therefrom?
Yes, he indicated at one point that his vehicle had contact with the victim. His impression was that Mr. Arbery had been trying to open the driver's side door but did not got to the driver's side door. He made that statement initially. The Glenn County Police Department that day actually photographed the truck. You can see some palm prints, appeared to be swipes on the rear driver's side door. His truck is a four-door truck, Your Honor. So there's some swipe marks and palm prints there. There's also white cotton fibers along the truck bed where the bed liner lips over the bed of the truck. There's a little bit of plastic of that bed liner. There is white cotton fibers along it, which Mr. Arbery, during this pursuit and incident, was wearing a white cotton shirt. There was also a dent directly below those white cotton fibers, and that dent we attributed to contact with Mr. Arbery because of its location.
And did Mr. Bryan confirm during his interviews that the dent was actually as a result of the vehicle making contact with him?
I believe that was his surmise,
okay,
but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Turning now to the situation we have involving the two pickup trucks. After Mr. Bryan turned around, can you confirm that both pickup trucks were essentially facing the same direction on Holmes?
Yes, they were. Both. It was Mr. Arbery running back down Holmes towards Secure Drive, Travis McMichael driving his truck directly behind Mr. Arbery, and then there was Mr. Bryan behind Travis McMichael's truck. At some point, Travis McMichael's truck gets ahead of Mr. Arbery.
What happens when the McMichael's truck gets ahead of the victim?
Their vehicle gets ahead of Mr. Arbery, then they stop their vehicle, and this is almost at the intersection of Sotilla Drive and Holmes Road. They stop.
Is this a public roadway?
It is.
Where is Mr. Bryan's vehicle located during this portion of the chase?
Mr. Bryan's vehicle is behind Mr. Aubrey. Mr. Aubrey at this point is between Travis McMichael's vehicle and Mr. Bryan's vehicle.
Is Mr. Bryan able to video any portion of what happens next?
He is.
Have you reviewed that video and do you have it?
I do, and I have.
Can you please describe the chronology of events after the McMichaels parked their vehicle in the middle of this public roadway as Mr. Aubrey approached the back of that vehicle?
Yes, I can. Mr. Bryan picks up the phone, it's been videotaping the whole time, and holds it up so you have a view. You see Mr. Aubrey running down Holmes Road, going towards Satilla Drive. You see Travis McMichael's truck is parked in the road. Travis McMichael, the driver's side door is open. Travis McMichael is there. It is apparent to me he is holding a firearm. His arm is raised. It's in a pointed position at one point. Then Mr. Aubrey is running. He then apparently sees what Travis McMichael in front of him. Then he changes direction to go around the passenger side of the vehicle.
Rather than going to the driver's side where you had seen Travis McMichael with the shotgun, he's now going to the opposite side of that truck that's parked in this public roadway.
That's correct. He's going around the truck.
What happened after that?
Travis McMichael then moved from the driver's side, where he's actually standing. When you open the driver's side door, the door is at his back initially in the video, and he's got the shotgun. He then positions himself around the driver's side door towards the front of the truck. You see Mr. Aubrey running alongside the passenger side, and again you see Travis McMichael has repositioned himself along the front of the truck. Mr. Aubrey then comes up to a position, sees Travis McMichael, then makes a decision and turns and decides to engage Travis McMichael.
What happens after that?
As he turns and goes towards Travis McMichael, you hear a shot. Then you see Travis McMichael moving backwards with Mr. Aubrey. Obviously, they were engaged in a physical confrontation at this point. They go off the screen. You then hear a second shot where you see blood and spray into the screen, a mist of it. Then they come back in to the view of the camera. There, Mr. Aubrey is striking Travis McMichael. There's a struggle going on, and then you see a third shot occur. The firearm being lower down like that. When you see after the third shot, you then see Mr. Aubrey get past Travis McMichael and continue running down Holmes, almost right there at the intersection, and then he falls.
You articulated 3 separate gunshots here, correct?
Yes, sir.
Where was Greg McMichael at the time that this was going on?
Greg McMichael was in the back of the pickup truck. When the situation began, he was on the phone.
At this point, have they finally called 911?
They have, yes.
And was he armed at that time?
He was. As the confrontation began, he drops the phone or puts the phone down and then pulls his weapon. And he has his weapon during the parts of the confrontation occurred.
When you talk about his weapon, are you referring to the .357 revolver that you had articulated earlier during this hearing?
I am.
And of note, can you tell the court and make a record about any significance about that weapon as even mentioned by Greg McMichael in terms of where he got it?
Yes, that was the same .686 Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolver that he carried when he was an officer with the Glenn County Police Department, and it's stamped Glenn County GCPD.
Did he articulate that he was a former law enforcement officer to Glenn County police officers when they arrived, and is that captured on body cam video?
It is. He said it several times.
And did he mention also several times that that was a gun that had been issued by Glenn County Police Department?
He did.
You mentioned 3 gunshot wounds in this particular case. Can you articulate for the court and the benefit of our record where those gunshot wounds were to Mr. Aubrey's body?
I can. Mr. Aubrey suffered a gunshot wound to the center of the chest. He also suffered a gunshot wound to the upper left chest around the armpit area here. Again, though, from the front to the back. He then suffered a shotgun wound to his right wrist.
I want to talk about other things that were collected by Glenn County Police Department. And again, this was not your crime scene in that you were asked to participate in this investigation later, correct?
That's correct.
You're aware, though, that certain items of evidence of significance were collected in this case by Glenn County Police Department?
I am, yes, sir.
How about the firearm?
Yes. Well, Travis McMichael's firearm was collected by the Glenn County Police Department.
And how many spent shell casings do we have from that shotgun?
3.
2 of them were expelled, is that accurate?
That is correct.
What about the third one? Where did that remain?
It was still within the chamber of the weapon.
And give a description briefly for the benefit of the court and the record about what type of firearm that was used to shoot Mr. Arbery.
The 870, Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun is a pump action shotgun, meaning that once a shot is fired, the front forearm of the weapon has to be operated to eject the spent shell, and then the forearm has to be operated again to load a new live round in.
During Travis McMichael's interview with police, did he make any admissions about firing the fatal gunshots in this particular case?
He did. He admitted firing the weapon 3 times.
And the first shot that he articulated, where did he indicate to police that shot landed?
The chest, Mr. Arbery's chest.
So the first shot that Travis McMichael said that was inflicted on Mr. Arbery was one of the chest wounds that you articulated here, correct?
That is correct.
And is there video evidence that you saw that tends to corroborate, based on your observation, that is an accurate statement that the chest wound was, or at least one of the chest wounds was the first shot that was fired at the deceased victim, Mr. Arbery?
Yes, sir, there is.
Can you articulate for the court how that is that you're able to see that?
After the first shot, again, you see a struggle between Travis McMichael and Mr. Arbery. During that struggle, Mr. Arbery, while he was wearing a white shirt during this incident, during that struggle, you see the front of his shirt is saturated with blood.
He's already saturated with blood before the struggle that you can see on the video.
Well, that's correct. During the struggle, it was mere seconds after the first shot, his front of his shirt is saturated with blood.
Okay. Because this is somewhat of a complicated situation, just doing it orally, do you think it would be a benefit to the court and this judge, who's the finder of fact, to use a map to sort of describe the sequence of events as we're able to piece it together based on interviews and video that you've reviewed?
I do, yes, sir.
Judge, we have brought to court today a map, and I know this is not the ideal setting in terms of use of technology, because we are having to utilize the technology for the benefit of the defendants who are observing remotely. The defense also brought a map, and I think we have a joint agreement that we will tender one of those maps. It's a blow-up map as a demonstrative aid so that we can use this to help articulate the sequence of events. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
We agree.
I don't know anything about it, but we'll go along.
So, for our purposes today, I will tender this blow-up as a demonstrative aid as State's Exhibit Number 1. We have a smaller version here in court that's very similar. And what I'll suggest to the court is that during a break, maybe we photograph or get a smaller digital photograph of this to make it part of our record. I understand that the defense might want to take this map with them when they leave, and the state has no objection to that, so long as we make a record about what the map looks like. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
I agree with
Yes.
we will grant that.
So again, Judge, I know these are not the ideal circumstances, and we are truly appreciative of the court being accommodating to us as we try to navigate through this pandemic and the issues that we're facing here. But I think during our test run, the best way we're able to do this will be the State's Exhibit Number 1 that we'll send to the defense. If I situate this appropriately, I believe that everyone can see that on the video. Let's get confirmation by thumbs up or otherwise.
Jesse, can you just turn it this way a little bit?
I can. Just trying to get the glare off of it. Yeah. Is that okay with you? I'd see glare on the corner, but otherwise you're satisfied.
We're satisfied.
I'm going to hand you this pointer. If you please extend that, Agent Jonathan Dow, and then I'm going to try to hold this. Describe what is depicted here for the benefit of Judge Harrell.
This is the Satilla Shores neighborhood.
And then show generally the entrance into Satilla Shores that you had talked about.
This is the entrance up here to Satilla Shores.
And you had talked generally about a house under construction. Let's talk about the locations that you've talked about during your testimony before we go into the chronology a little bit more.
Certainly. Again, this is Tilla Drive. It comes down. This would be approximately the residence that was under construction. And that would belong to Mr. Larry English. This is marked as 230 Satilla Drive. This is Greg and Travis McMichael's residence where they resided. Down Burford, it would be within this area here is William Bryan's residence along Burford.
And then what about Holmes Drive? Do you see that depicted here as well?
Yes, this is Satilla Drive here. This is Holmes Road. The intersection, the shooting incident took place about here.
Based on the chronology that you have just described for the court, please show where Mr. Arbery would have initially entered this neighborhood.
He would enter the neighborhood from up here, which is the entrance. Again, along Satilla Drive is where the house under construction is, and that's where you first see him. We have him on video. It's coming along Satilla Drive in this direction and coming into the house.
Will you make sure that you speak up really loudly, since our court reporter is now facing your back, and I trust you'll give me an indication if you cannot hear. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Yes, this is Satilla Drive when you come in from the front. If you'll come here, this is the house that's under construction. We have video of Mr. Arbery as he's coming in this direction down Satilla Drive when he enters into the home that's under construction.
I don't think we've explicitly covered times yet, but was this broad daylight?
It was, yes. It was approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, so it's afternoon.
Yes, sir.
And what about weather conditions? Sunny?
Sunny, clear, yes, sir.
Describe now the chronology based on the statements that you all have of the defendants and the video that you pieced together of where Ahmaud Arbery initially traveled and what transpired involving the 2 pickup trucks.
Certainly. So, again, Mr. Arbery is inside the house that's under construction. The neighbor comes out, sees him. He is standing approximately here. He's the one that calls 911.
Police are on their way?
Yes, sir. Police are on their way.
Let me ask you this. Did any police officers actually respond in such haste that they were able to hear anything?
Yes, sir. The first responding officer, again, he is coming back down here. He then hears the gunshots, and he notes that in his body cam footage.
Not to keep interrupting you, but if you will describe the path of travel of Mr. Arbery per statements and video.
Certainly. Again, Mr. Arbery comes out of the residence under construction, then heads south along Satilla Drive. You see him on the video as he comes in this direction. This, again, is Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael's house. Greg McMichael's statement is that he goes in, tells Travis, they then grab their weapons. On the video, you see what appears to be Travis McMichael's truck come off of 230 Satilla Drive and go in this direction in pursuit of Mr. Arbery. According to their statements, Mr. Arbery then comes down Satilla Drive. He then goes onto Burford Road. Again, he comes by Mr. Bryan's house, which would be in this area here. There's video. He's going back and forth by Travis McMichael's truck at this point. Then, according to statements, Mr. Arbery goes down Buford. Travis McMichael is pursuing him down Buford. Before they get to the turn here, Mr. Arbery turns back and goes back north along Buford. This is when Greg McMichael gets out of his vehicle. In the meantime, Mr. Bryan has decided to go in pursuit himself. He has entered his truck. He sees Mr. Arbery coming down Buford. He pulls out in the roadway and attempts to block him in and stop him. Mr. Arbery goes around his truck. At this point, Mr. Bryan is in pursuit of Mr. Arbery, trying to stop him, trying to detain him. Travis McMichael has made the decision to, instead of going back this way, to go around Buford to when it turns into Zellwood here, and to come back along all the way up Zellwood and turn down Holmes Road. Mr. Travis McMichael's statement is to try to cut Mr. Arbery off.
I want to pause and ask you some questions of what you just articulated for the court. There was a point in time, at least one, where Mr. Arbery's path of travel was redirected, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was it redirected in such a manner that had he continued straight, he would have been able to leave the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Arbery ever able to leave this neighborhood based on the evidence that you have?
No, sir, he was killed before he exited the neighborhood.
You talked, based on my questioning, on direct about the two vehicles, the two pickup trucks in this neighborhood separating at one point. Describe in more detail the path of travel of both of the trucks after they separated, essentially.
Certainly. Mr. Bryan, again, is headed, generally north on Buford back towards Satilla Drive in pursuit of Mr. Aubrey, because that's the direction Mr. Aubrey is going at this point, is back towards Satilla Drive, which is the way he has come into the neighborhood, and he's going back the way he came. Of course, Travis McMichael, as I said, he is at this point on Buford. Instead of going back in pursuit, he decides to loop around, according to his statement, and try to cut off Mr. Aubrey by going down Holmes Road.
Was Mr. Arbery redirected by Mr. Bryan's vehicle such that he could not make it straight out of the exit of this particular neighborhood?
That's correct. Again, Mr. Bryan has stated that he tried to stop and detain Mr. Aubrey several times. At one point, actually, Mr. Bryan goes on Satilla Drive. Mr. Aubrey, being pursued by Mr. Bryan, turns down Holmes Road quickly to the point where Mr. Bryan has to turn around and then go down Holmes Road. So he's pursuing, Mr. Aubrey's going down Holmes Road towards Zellwood. Mr. Bryan is coming behind Mr. Aubrey on Holmes Road towards Zellwood, while Travis McMichael is turning off of Zellwood onto Holmes Road, coming back towards Mr. Aubrey.
Is this the point that you had just articulated for the court earlier this morning, that the two vehicles are essentially facing each other, almost pinning Ahmaud Arbery in between the two?
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
And describe, if you will, what happened next based on the video and the statements that you have that were obtained as part of this investigation.
Yes. On Holmes Road, according to the video and the statements, Mr. Aubrey turns and goes back towards Mr. Bryan. We do not know from the investigation at this point whether he saw Mr. McMichael's truck at this point, but that's a reasonable conclusion at this point. But he turns around, goes back towards Mr. Bryan, goes around Mr. Bryan's truck. Mr. Bryan then pulls off the road because Mr. Travis McMichael's truck is coming back towards Mr. Aubrey. And Mr. Bryan then, after Travis McMichael's truck passes, gets back onto Holmes Road and proceeds back towards the intersection of Holmes Road and Satilla Drive in pursuit of Mr. Aubrey and Travis McMichael's truck.
Is this the point in time where both the vehicles are essentially facing the same direction?
It is, yes.
And this roadway, obviously we're just looking at a map here. You've been to it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it a wide roadway or is it fairly narrow?
It's fairly narrow, yes, sir.
Why don't you describe, first of all, had Mr. Aubrey been able to make it to the intersection here of Holmes, and I guess that's Satilla, had he made a right there, had he been able to make a right, where would he have been able to go?
He would have gone up Satilla Drive and out of the neighborhood.
And what's across from this neighborhood that you'd given some testimony about before?
There's Highway 17 is here, and across Highway 17 is the entrance into Mr. Aubrey's neighborhood. It goes back into where he lives.
His neighborhood's right across the highway?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, we pick up here with some of the video that you've observed that Mr. Bryan took, correct?
Yes, sir.
Describe where generally the sequence of events occurred in terms of the fatal shooting of Mr. Aubrey on Holmes Drive.
So, Travis McMichael at some point has gotten in front of Mr. Aubrey. He actually stops right about here near the intersection of Holmes Road and Satilla Drive. That's where he stops his vehicle. It is facing towards the intersection of Satilla Drive with the rear of the vehicle facing back down Holmes Road. Mr. Bryan, from the video, is coming down Holmes Road. Mr. Aubrey is between the two trucks.
He's trapped in between the two?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Bryan, then you see there's a slight curve in the vehicle, which would be approximately this curve here. Mr. Aubrey is coming towards Mr. McMichael's truck. Mr. McMichael is outside of the driver's side of the truck, armed with the shotgun at this point. Mr. Aubrey then comes, sees Mr. McMichael, changes and goes around the passenger side of the vehicle, not towards Travis McMichael, but around it. And then Travis McMichael changes his position to the front of the vehicle, and at that point is when Mr. Aubrey sees Travis McMichael change his position in front of the vehicle and then engages Mr. McMichael.
That's where the shooting took place?
Yeah, the first shot, yes, sir. After the first shot, then, because Travis McMichael doesn't back up during the first shot, after the first shot, there's the physical confrontation. You see Travis McMichael backing up. There is a physical altercation at this point. You see that you hear the second shot is off camera as well, but you do see the blood mist come into the camera screen. Then you see them both Travis McMichael and Mr. Aubrey are fighting. They come back into the view of the screen. Then you see the third shot.
But this is all, the altercation you talk about is all after that first shot to the chest that Travis McMichael made an admission about.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And for the benefit of our record, I thought I heard this, and I know it's a minor error, but I want to make sure we're making a record. I think you said curb or bend in the vehicle. You meant bend in the road.
Road. I meant the road. Yes, sir.
Yes,
I apologize.
I just wanted to make sure that we're accurate on,
Yes, sir.
on that point. All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to set this here, and I'm going to let you hold that in case there's any cross that you might need it for. During the investigation of this case, you're aware of the cause and manner of death as determined by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Medical Examiner's Office, correct?
I am.
And can you please articulate for the benefit of the court and our record cause and manner of death?
Cause was gunshot wound. Manner was homicide.
I want to talk about statements of the defendants. There were statements of all three defendants that were given to a number of investigators in the case, including Glenn County Police Department.
That's correct.
First, focusing on Greg McMichael's statement, was there any body cam video obtained showing statements that he made to responding officers?
There was, yes, sir.
And just summarize any admissions or statements that he made to Glenn County police officers.
Greg McMichael pretty much relates on the body cam footage, and then later on, whenever he actually is interviewed on camera by the Glenn County Police Department, he makes admissions to seeing Mr. Aubrey running down the roadway. His statement to the effect is he didn't know Mr. Aubrey had stolen anything or not, but he had a gut feeling that Mr. Aubrey may have been responsible for thefts that were in the neighborhood previously. And I think he actually says gut. His instinct told him that. He then tells Travis McMichael. He then describes the pursuit of Mr. Aubrey. He says that during Greg McMichael's statement, he only hears 2 shots during his statement. It appears by looking at his description of events that he either didn't realize the first shot or didn't register it. He was admits to being on the phone with 911 when the shooting was occurring, pulling his weapon.
Did he make any admissions to you about Mr. Bryan at some point volunteering to join into this chase of Mr. Aubrey in the neighborhood, and how did he describe that?
Yeah, he described that Mr. Bryan was trying to block him in as well.
Okay. And at the point of the actual shooting itself, did Mr. Greg McMichael make any admissions to Glenn County investigators about any statements that he was making to Travis McMichael about what he sure shouldn't do?
Yes. He says on the body camera footage of the first officer, he tells him that he was telling Travis McMichael, don't shoot.
Despite that, do you have video footage showing that essentially Greg McMichael is covering Travis with a .357?
I do, yes, sir.
And what did Greg McMichael say about Travis's shooting of the victim in terms of where he shot him specifically on his body?
Chest.
Okay. Similarly, was there video footage, both body cam and also interview footage of Travis McMichael and his assertions about what happened on this date?
Yes. Travis McMichael's particularly interview was done at the Glenn County Police Department with him, where he went into detail.
Did Travis McMichael make any admissions about ordering the victim at gunpoint to try to get on the ground or anything like that?
Yes, he did.
Prior to the shooting?
Prior to the shooting, yes, sir.
And what about any admissions that were made about the fatal shooting itself?
He admits to firing his shotgun 3 times. He says that all 3 shots struck the victim, and he said that the first shot was to the chest of the victim.
Prior to that, had Mr. Travis McMichael made any admissions about choosing to chase the victim with this pickup truck you described?
Yes.
He was the driver of that truck?
He was the driver of the truck, yes.
I now want to turn your attention to Mr. Roddy Bryan. And are you aware of any admissions that he made both to Glenn County Police Department as well as investigators with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations about his role in this particular crime that led to the arrest warrants you obtained?
Yes, sir, I am.
Can you describe generally for the court some of the specific admissions that were made by Mr. Bryan?
Mr. Bryan admits to joining the pursuit of Mr. Aubrey. He admits to trying to block Mr. Aubrey in, trying to detain him several times, both before Mr. Aubrey turned onto Holmes Road and then while on Holmes Road.
Did he make any admissions to using his vehicle to redirect the victim within the Satilla Shores neighborhood prior to the fatal shooting?
Yes, he did.
And did he talk about the victim doubling back and trying to get away from this vehicle?
He did, yes, several times.
Did he confirm for you that the video you've now seen and collected was made by him on his cell phone?
He did.
Did he also confirm, he being Mr. Bryan, that he saw Travis stopped in the middle of the roadway as Mr. Bryan was driving after Mr. Aubrey leading to the fatal shooting?
He did.
For purposes of our record, we've had the benefit of this witness being able to identify the McMichaels because they're seen on video, but because defendant has waived his presence for Mr. Bryan, we're not able to do an in-court identification of him. Are you stipulating to identify? Okay. So for our record, I'll ask the court to accept that stipulation that Mr. Bryan, though not present for this particular hearing, has been identified, had this witness been able to be asked about that particular issue.
All right, I would accept that.
Thank you, sir. The last thing that I think I need to talk to you about, well, last couple things. This is going to involve an uncomfortable conversation, and you and I have talked about this a couple of times. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, we have.
You know that I want to ask you about a particular quote that Travis McMichael stated on the crime scene that was overheard by one of the defendants and shared with investigators prior to police arriving, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And though this may be an uncomfortable conversation for the benefit of the court and for the record, we're making it clear that this is not your quote, it's not the GBI's quote. This is a quote from a statement of Mr. Bryan as to what he heard Travis McMichael say prior to police arriving, correct?
Very much so, yes, sir.
Understanding that and understanding that it might be a little uncomfortable to talk about the words because it involves a curse word and something else, I need to ask you about that quote. Can you please articulate for the court what Mr. Bryan said he heard Travis McMichael say prior to police arriving and after the fatal shooting?
Yes, Mr. Bryan said that after the shooting took place, before police arrival, while Mr. Aubrey was on the ground, that he heard Travis McMichael make the statement, "Fucking nigger."
Since becoming involved in this investigation, you've acquired a number of other videos that have been reviewed, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And I want to ask you, because we're talking about principles involving party of the crime and things like that, have you also had an opportunity, you and your agency, to review any jail recordings?
We have, yes, sir.
So I want to ask a couple of things regarding the jail recordings and also about conversations between the defendants prior to the arrest. Was there a delay before you were involved in the case and able to secure the arrest warrants that are the subject of this preliminary hearing?
There was, yes, sir.
Have you had an opportunity to review whether there's any evidence that the defendants communicated with each other after the fatal shooting but prior to the arrest warrants in this case?
Yes, sir, I have.
And tell the court what you found about that, since we're talking about party to the crime and conspiracy culpability in just a few minutes.
Yes, we have uncovered evidence through statements that Greg McMichael had conversation with Mr. Bryan concerning the video and the incident.
Okay. And specifically, have you acquired a jail call where any of the McMichaels refer to Mr. Bryan in a favorable way?
I have. During a jail call that my agency obtained and reviewed, Greg McMichael was on the phone with a caller. The caller asked him about Mr. Bryan. At first, Mr. McMichael says he can't talk about it, and then he says that Mr. Bryan is an ally.
He uses the term ally referencing his co-defendant, Mr. Bryan.
He does.
This is after the McMichael's arrest, but prior to Mr. Bryan's arrest?
And that's correct.
Just a moment, sir. I think that's all I have at this time, Judge.
All right. Have the defendants made a decision about the order of cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you read it?
I will begin on behalf of Travis.
You proceed to cross-examine?
Judge, if we could take a brief recess, I do need to speak with
All right.
my client, and I need to time that I'm
We're going to take a 15-minute break then.
Thank you, Judge.
All rise. Committee, stand easy.
Yes, sir. The restroom or whatever. I'll meet you. Which one is that? We're good. 8. Yes, sir.
What we have? We have proceed.
We're ready to proceed, Your Honor. Your Honor, very much appreciate the opportunity that you have given us by holding this hearing, and done so amidst the chaos of what's happening out in the world with coronavirus and what's happening outside. We obviously respect both of the families in this ordeal and this tragedy, and our hearts go out to the Arbery's. And we will proceed this morning with our cross-examination of Special Agent Dial. Special Agent, I'm Jason Sheffield. We've had the occasion to talk on the phone a couple of times.
Yes, sir.
Assisting you and getting you cell phones and Mr. McMichael's truck. Is that correct?
That is, sir. Yes, sir.
Beyond that, we haven't really talked much about the case.
That's correct, sir.
We appreciate you being here today.
Okay.
Thank you. One of the things that we asked you to do when you came to court today was to bring your case file. That term case file, is that a term that you recognize?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. Did you bring your case file with you today?
What I brought today was the written documentation for our case file, our case report, I guess you would say. The attachments to my case file are over 40 gigabytes of data at this point, and it's stored on a server in Atlanta, and the time required to download it remotely is rather long, so I was not able to obtain the attachments. But the case file which is our case reports, I was able to obtain, but many of those are incomplete, partially typed, unapproved. Again, this is an ongoing case, and the way our system works is you input the report, and then it has to be checked by the agent to make sure it's correct and this kind of thing. So, but the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, good. And I appreciate that. And so what you're holding in your hand right there, that's not the case file. Those are just some notes.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And had you had a chance to review the case file prior to your testimony today so that you could be prepared to answer as many questions as you could?
Yes, sir. I have reviewed some of the summaries that are part of the case file. Again, it's not complete. Actions have been taken and the reports have not been generated yet in reference to the case because of the time it's taken to conduct the investigation.
Your testimony on direct has been very complete. You don't seem to have any issues remembering anything up to this point, so it seems like you've done a good job of reading the case file.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And as the lead agent in the case, does that mean that all of the agents that are working the case with you report directly to you?
Yes, sir. They conduct the interviews or investigative act and then report back to me at the results or salient details in reference to it.
Okay. And you've had an opportunity, even though some of those reports aren't written yet, but to speak to those officers and those agents prior to your testimony today?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, great. You've mentioned that your investigation is ongoing. What about your investigation is still ongoing?
We are still conducting, I've left up a few interviews to conduct. We are still waiting on the results from various search warrants for records to come back to us.
What kind of records?
Judge, at this point, I'm going to object to relevance. This seems outside the scope of the issue, which is very narrow, of what is the probable cause for the basis of these warrants.
I will allow the question.
Thank you, Judge. What kind of records?
It would be telephone records, social media records. Those records, search warrants are out pending, as well as the digital analysis of cell phones and electronic items that were seized. Those are in the hands of technicians, but there is a delay in reviewing those records, I think, because of some legal concerns that have been raised involving privilege.
Okay. What is it that you're looking for exactly, and how does it fit into your case?
Judge, I have to object. I think that's fishing and not relevant to the issue of probable cause, which is the facts and circumstances leading to the death on February 23rd of 2020.
I will allow the question.
Well, it depends on the various items or what we're looking for. Of course, each...
You mentioned phone records, cell phones, and social media.
Yes, sir. During this case, it came through interviews. We've established that communication was made in reference to the incident through social media. There is also...
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your answer.
Okay, there were communications that were made about the shooting.
By whom?
By Greg McMichael through Facebook. He posted about it through Facebook, as well as contact was made from witnesses to him through Facebook, which subsequently followed up with a call from him to at least one witness where he described what occurred. There has also been pictures of the crime scene posted on social media by some of the McMichael family.
Do you know who posted them?
I do. Lindsay McMichael posted at least one. She has admitted to posting one photograph of the crime scene. We have interviews with other witnesses that indicate there may be, or another witness that indicates there may be more photos that were posted. So that's one of the search warrants we are exploring.
Okay. Anything else from social media?
Yes, sir. There is some comments that were made in reviewing Travis McMichael's cell phone concerning comments he had made about burglary in area that occurred in the area that was posted on Satilla Shore's Facebook page. So we are seeking his Facebook records in reference to following up on those comments, as well as a comment he made through Instagram with the witness that we believe may be pertinent to this case.
Okay. And his comments on Facebook or Instagram, these are after the shooting or before?
Before.
Okay. And those are relevant to you about what was happening in the neighborhood? Is that what you're saying?
No, people are talking about that there's break-ins in their neighborhood. I believe in one comment, Travis McMichael makes the comment through his Facebook, arm up. And another comment, people are talking about that there was I believe it's an entering auto that occurred in the neighborhood. And he said, better hope they don't come to this side of the neighborhood.
Okay.
Or they better hope they don't come to this side of the neighborhood.
And what is it that you understood he was referencing specifically?
I understood he was referencing conducting physical harm to whoever was entering the autos and doing.
Well, I'm also asking, I guess, what is it that he's referring to about break-ins in the neighborhood? Is there more specific details about that?
Yes. Through our review of the record, it appears that there were 2 entering auto reports, which includes his vehicle, somebody on January 1st of 2020, during somebody, or he alleges that someone went into his unlocked truck and removed a firearm. There's also one other report in reference to an entering auto. I believe there's been reviewing the records from the Glenn County Police Department going back to July 1st. I believe there is one other allegation involving a theft, but in that report, the person is renting a room in a house and is alleging that the person in the house has stolen something from the room. And then there is one call in reference to a burglary, but there's no report attached to it. It appears that a burglar alarm went off, and that comes from a call report. But throughout the Stilla Shores Facebook page, there's discussion of those events and his related comments are reference to those events.
Okay. So the Stilla Shores Facebook page, is it your understanding that, I'm not talking about Mr. McMichael, I'm talking about Travis.
Okay.
That he was aware of what was happening with break-ins and burglaries in Stilla Shores?
Yes, sir. From that yes, sir.
From the Facebook group?
Yes, sir. And I believe there's also discussion amongst it. I know he was familiar with the February 11th, 2020 incident where he believed Mr. Aubrey had went into the house under construction because he actually called 911 in that instance.
Okay, all right. So what you're looking for then is any statements made by him through social media about his knowledge of these break-ins and burglaries and what he has to say about them?
With the Facebook, yes, sir.
And then the cell phone records, are you looking for calls between individuals? Or are you looking for things that he may have done on his phone?
Yes, sir. Calls, really, the day in question, his phone was present. His phone was used to call 911. It was downloaded by the Glenn County Police Department, but the time data for that 911 call was not captured during the phone download. So part of the cell phone request for records is hopefully to capture that communication as well as to show if there's any communication between parties.
Okay. And I think you've also mentioned, I'm aware that you have sought Mr. McMichael's truck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is it that you're looking for through the truck?
We actually,
assist you in your investigation?
Sure, we actually completed a search warrant on the truck. The belief was that his truck contained a computer module, which at that time I believed all modern vehicles did, but his turned out not to have a computer in the engine. But that can have data concerning devices that are connected to it, as well as various events that are recorded within those computer systems. His truck being present at the scene of the shooting, we were hoping to capture some of the data with that. Of course, the search warrant, once we got the truck and looked, there was no computer system in the truck. The search warrant also authorized us to photograph during the body camera footage from the day of the shooting. The toolbox of his truck is up, and there is a Confederate flag sticker displayed on the toolbox. So we sought a search warrant to document that as well.
Going back to you coming onto the case, I think you were asked by the district attorney about how you got brought into the case.
Yes, sir.
It sounded like that you testified that you called to see if you could lend some assistance to the investigation. Is that correct?
I did not. No, sir. I believe it was the director of my agency called.
Okay, that'd be Mr. Dick Reynolds?
I believe so, yes, sir, but I have not had a conversation with him about that. That's just my understanding.
No, you know him to be the director?
Oh, yes, I meant the call.
You're not sure if he made the call, but it was your agency that reached out to ask if they could get involved.
Yes, sir. That's my understanding.
Do you know why your agency asked to get involved?
I do not. That'd be a question for him, sir.
Okay. Or whether they were asked by anybody in particular to get involved?
I do not know that personally. No.
Have you heard? Or what have you
I have my understanding that the governor has made a statement to that effect in the news media that he directed the director, but that was relayed to me secondhand. I did not see that directly.
Did you get any information about what the governor directed Mr. Reynolds to do?
No, sir.
Okay. In your getting into the case, did you consult with any attorneys as you were moving into the case around May 5th and May 6th?
We, not at May 5th or May 6th, no, sir. On May 7th, we had a meeting with Tom Durden, which was the district attorney assigned to the case, where we laid out and discussed the legal aspects of the case with him.
And was he your point of contact in terms of discussing what warrants you might take?
Yes, sir. At that time, yes, sir.
Okay. This was prior to the DA from Cobb County being involved, Ms. Holmes?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And so as you are stepping into the case, you said that you received information that you were going to get involved around May 5th. Is that correct?
I got a call on the evening of May 5th by my SAC advising that the GBI had been requested in reference to the case.
SAC Special Agent in Charge.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, Special Agent in Charge. I then received a call from my inspector on the morning of the 6th, instructing me that I was the assigned case agent.
Did you learn anything about the case from either of them?
No, sir.
Or what the directive may be?
Just to investigate the case was my understanding.
Were you aware of the shooting that had happened back on February 23rd prior to the 5th?
Yes, sir, I was.
Were you aware of what was happening with demonstrations and what was happening with sort of unrest in the community?
Yes, sir, I was.
Had you any time ever spoken with Glenn County Police Department, anyone in Glenn County, about their investigation prior to your involvement?
We had had discussion with them about the expected protests, but
When was that conversation?
I know there was, I believe earlier that week, that Monday, I believe there was, if that or the week before.
In May?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. There was information about a protest, and the Glenn County Police Department interim chief of police, Jay Wiggins, contacted all local and state law enforcement in the area to have a meeting in reference to possible resources they could provide in reference to any protests that could occur.
What was your belief about the work that Glenn County had done in their investigation, and whether that investigation was a good and thorough investigation, and whether they had made the right decision or the wrong decision?
Objection is to relevance. It doesn't really matter what other investigators might think about the case. This is probable cause.
You can ask them, what did they do?
Okay, how will you? Were you aware of what Glenn County had done in their investigation prior to that early week in May when you were asked to get involved?
All I knew is they had conducted an investigation. I didn't know
Were you
any
aware
particulars.
that they had made the decision not to make an arrest?
Judge, again, object to relevance.
I can rephrase. Were you aware of the letter that that the DA had written to the sheriff, George Barnhill had written about his decision not to arrest?
Objection, relevance.
I don't see what that has anything to do with the case. Ask another question.
Okay. May I ask if he's aware of the letter, Judge? The letter has information in and about the Glenn County investigation. I'd just like to know if he reviewed it.
You can ask him about the letter.
Have you read the letter by Mr. George Barnhill, the district attorney, to the sheriff of Glenn County?
Not to
Chief of
the,
police.
yes, sir. I read the letter that he wrote in reference to Tom Jump, I believe, which is not the chief of police, but I think he was captain of investigations.
Okay. And you've read that letter?
I have, yes, sir.
So prior to engaging in your investigation, you had an understanding of the decision not to make the arrest? At that point?
Object to relevance.
I'll let you ask the question.
Not prior to my investigation. I believe I read that letter during my investigation.
Okay. And when you got involved in the morning of May 6th?
I believe I read the letter on May 6th, yes, sir. Not the morning. I believe it was in the afternoon, but I read it.
The decision to take the warrant, what time did you decide and what day did you decide that you were going to be taking a warrant for the arrest of Travis McMichael?
That would be the afternoon of May 7th when we met with the district attorney, Tom Durden, and discussed the facts that we had accumulated and asked his legal opinion concerning various matters.
Okay, so when you get involved in the morning of May 6th, by the afternoon of May 7th, you said you have reviewed facts.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay.
And conducted investigative acts.
And conducted investigative acts.
Yes, sir.
What did those investigative acts include?
Well, we had an agent. I cannot recall every investigative act that was conducted during that time
We
frame.
followed you there. I understand that.
Mhm.
And if you need to refer to your case file that you brought with you, we can give you the time to do that.
But they would necessarily would not. My case file is not complete, so I wouldn't know if those acts had been documented or not. So that would not help me to properly reflect all the investigative acts that occurred.
What I want you to focus on, if you don't mind, is you made a decision to take warrants for felony murder and aggravated assault against Travis McMichael.
I did, yes, sir.
Afternoon of May 7th. So
Yes, sir.
within a little greater than a 24-hour period.
Yes, sir.
So I'm asking you then, what investigative acts did you do within that 32-hour period to make the decision that an arrest needed to be made?
And I understand, and I can tell you some of the investigative acts, but I cannot give you a complete list.
Got it.
Okay. We had an agent interview Larry English to establish that there was no theft at the residence. We also...
Why was that important to you to establish there was no theft at the residence?
Because part of the letter that you referenced to George Barnhill, he was alluding to the fact that there was a burglary in progress. There's no evidence of a burglary taking place. The fact that Mr. Aubrey had been there numerous times before, nothing had been taken. The fact that they were reported as trespassing, not burglary. Again, we had reviewed all Glenn County Police Department's case file. We then...
At that time, you had reviewed the Glenn County case file within that 32-hour period?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That means all of their written reports,
Yes, sir.
the medical examiner's report?
Yes, sir.
Photographs taken?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Didn't have cell phone records at that time? Or
There was cell phone download. That part we had problems getting into because of the format, and I don't really understand that. I am not a technically wise person, but the person that was assigned to look at the cell phone records had issues getting into them. We were able to have to get another copy from the Glenn County Police Department to further look into the cell phone records, is my understanding.
if I could go back, so you spoke with Larry English, who said to you, or one of your agents, I have not, in fact, had anything stolen from me at any point in time. Is that correct?
From that residence.
From the 226 Hill.
They can establish that residence.
Okay. And I think you said that therefore there was no burglary that happened in your mind. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it that you believe that an item has to actually be stolen for the burglary to be committed?
My understanding of the law is for burglary to be committed, you have to enter a structure with the intention of committing a felony or a theft. Neither a fact could I establish in this investigation Mr. Aubrey had committed.
Okay. But the burglary statute, to your knowledge, does not require an actual theft to be completed. It can be to enter simply
True.
with the intent to commit a theft.
But at no time did it appear he was interrupted and he didn't steal anything. So I do not think you could establish as a point of law that his intention was to steal something if he had been in the residence multiple times and never taken something and then he left without taking anything. That was my reasoning.
Okay. Are you aware of all of the times that Mr. English called the police about a suspicious person in his residence?
I am aware that he has called the police in the past about a suspicious person in the residence. Yes, sir.
Are you aware if there are videos that exist of those moments where he saw a suspicious person on his cameras?
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed that video footage?
I have reviewed the video footage he has provided to us. Yes, sir.
And when is the video footage from? What dates is it from?
I don't recall the dates.
Okay. Does October 25th, 2019 sound familiar?
Could be, yes, sir.
November 18th, 2019?
Could be, yes, sir.
Okay. February 11th, 2019?
That one I do remember, yes, sir.
And in the video footage, you're saying you don't see anybody stealing anything, actually?
I don't see Mr. Aubrey stealing anything. Like I said, there were children that took some scrap wood, but he did not consider
When did that happen?
I don't remember the date on that.
But not the dates I've just disclosed?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
And
my understanding is he knew the children and did not really consider that. I don't believe he called the police on that instance.
the 911 calls from those instances, have you reviewed those 911 calls by Mr. English to see whether the statement he gave you about no theft matched what he told the police?
I have reviewed the report from February 11th, which reviewed that, but the 911 call, I do not believe I had personally reviewed it, no, sir.
To make a determination if he was reporting to police contemporaneously that he had in fact that thing stolen.
Judge, I object to relevance. All of these questions are involving other acts, and we're here for probable cause as to the issuance of the arrest warrant for February 23rd of 2020. I don't believe we've had any questions about that to date.
May I respond?
Yes.
The issue that I believe we heard on direct testimony was that there was a history of problems in the neighborhood that neighbors were communicating about, that Travis McMichael and his father believed that, I think the testimony was, the guy was running past the house. And so I'm merely inquiring if he is aware of the statements that the homeowner who owns the residence that was being burglarized, if he has reviewed that enough to determine whether that person's statements actually do establish a burglary or not.
I'll let you answer the question.
Thank you. So I guess my question was, it sounds like your answer is no. The 911 calls you have not reviewed. What Mr. English is telling the police contemporaneously on October 25th or November 18th about whether he believes something was stolen.
I have reviewed the February 11th report from the police where he clearly tells them that nothing has been taken,
Okay.
that the person is doing no damage.
On February 11th.
On February 11th, yes, sir.
I got you.
And in the past, he notes that in the report. So I have reviewed that police report, which is a statement that he made to a law enforcement officer prior to this shooting incident. I have also reviewed Greg McMichael's statement made to the Glenn County Police Department, where he says that he knew nothing was taken on February 11th. He didn't believe anything had been taken from the house in the past. He said it's possible, but he didn't believe so.
Okay. I'll get to that.
Okay.
You had begun to speak a little bit about Mr. Arbery's background. You were asked questions about athletics and things that he did for leisure. I think running was one of those things.
Yes, sir.
Did you get any information about where he would go for runs and whether that included the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
I did, yes, sir.
And what did you learn about whether he had run previously in Satilla Shores?
Yes, we found witnesses in Satilla Shores that had confirmed that he did run through Satilla Shores.
And did they give you an estimation of when that was, or just that they had seen him generally before?
I don't recall. I believe there were the witnesses we interviewed. I did not personally interview him. Was relayed to me is that they had seen him run through the neighborhood before. That at least one of them had engaged in frequent conversations with him while he was running through there, and I believe they gave a time frame that they would normally see him running through the neighborhood.
And that witness, have you documented that interview with the witness's name and contact information?
It will be documented. I did not do the interview, but yes,
that is
sir.
something that has happened since the arrest on May 7th?
No, that was before May 7th.
That was before?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of what we were talking about, is what you had done in that 32-hour period. Larry English was one person that you had spoken to. What else did you do in that period of time?
We conducted a neighborhood canvass of Satilla Shores, where again we located the witnesses that had seen Mr. Arbery running. We spoke with family members who confirmed that he ran. I'm sorry, that's all that comes to the top of my head but I know there was other investigative acts that were accomplished, but I don't recall them offhand.
These investigative things that you're doing, this is going to assist you in making your decision about whether or not to arrest for felony murder, correct?
No, that's correct. Now, I do remember, too, that we actually had received enhanced audio and I believe stabilized video from the 911 call that Greg McMichael had that occurred during the shooting. That was reviewed. Like I said,
enhanced video, do you mean Mr. Bryan's video?
Yeah, I do. It was stabilized, is what they called it, where it makes it where it's not as shaky, moving back and forth. That was done by ROCIC for us. I believe we obtained that before the arrest warrants were sought. So yes, sir.
And then I think you've already said that you reviewed the entire Glenn County file, which included Mr. McMichael's statements, also his father's statements, and Mr. Bryan's statements.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. You've mentioned that Mr. Bryan has told you that Travis McMichael used this awful cursing term. Is that something that you learned prior to the arrest decision on the 7th?
No, sir. That we learned that information afterwards, and he did not tell me personally. He told an agent with the GBI.
And I'm going to assume that it was told to either you or your agents working under your direction.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, May 7th, we're now at June 4th. When did you learn from Mr. Bryan that Travis McMichael allegedly cursed and said that horrible word at the deceased body of Mr. Arbery?
I believe that interview was conducted on May 13th.
Okay, so after your decision to arrest,
Yes,
May 13th. At that time, how is it, sir, of 2020?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
How is it that Mr. Roddy was in a position to come and speak to you or your agent about that on that particular day? Did you call him? Did your agent call him? How did that come? How did he come in to speak with you?
My agent had actually already interviewed him. I believe 2
Prior
days.
to the 13th?
Yes, sir. 2 days prior. My agent had spoken with his attorney, and I believe Mr. Bryan had agreed to an interview and then agreed to a subsequent interview where they would go into details involving the shooting incident.
So on the May 11th interview, if Mr. Roddy did not say or allege that Travis McMichael said that awful thing.
I don't think the interview was focused on the time of the shooting. It was, I believe, subsequent to the shooting was the focus of that interview.
I understand. But he didn't say it on that day, to your knowledge.
I don't believe so, no, sir.
And looking back to February 23rd, 24th, moving all the way through February and March and April and the first 11 days in May, he had never told anyone that Travis McMichael had made that horrible statement, had he?
Not that I'm aware of, he hasn't. He had not provided that information nor provided information concerning the video that he had at his residence, surveillance video that captured.
Right, somebody else released that video.
No, I'm talking about the surveillance video at his house.
His home house video.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
He revealed that to us as well, and we were able to get a copy of that.
And that was on the 13th?
I believe so, yes, sir. But I'm not. That might have been the 11th. I don't recall what day that occurred on.
Okay. But the answer to the question is, he had been, I'll rephrase, he had been asked about the shooting from as far back as February 23rd and given statements to police about it at that time.
He was interviewed on February 23rd where he made no mention about that statement. As far as I know, he was not interviewed again until my agent contacted him in May.
And preceding that interview, I think you just testified that his attorney got involved and was a part of the decision to have him come forward and be interviewed on the 11th and the 13th.
His attorney was present, yes, sir, during the interviews, if that's your question.
Yeah. And was the district attorney present at that meeting as well?
No, sir.
Just yourself or one of your agents?
One of my agents did the interview, and I believe another agent was called in to help with the technical involving, because there was a consent to download his phone again, so another agent assisted in that matter. But yes, sir, that's all I believe was there.
Has that been recorded and documented?
As far as the download of the phone?
No, the interview of Mr. Bryan. Video recorded?
It was audio recorded, and I know it was at least audio recorded. I am not sure if it was video recorded as well. I do not know.
Are you aware if Mr. Bryan had any promises of leniency at the time he made that statement?
I am not aware of any.
Or a promise not to arrest or indict him for these charges?
I'm not aware of any.
Not aware.
Yes.
Is that something that you would typically be made aware of?
I did not have any conversation with the attorney or him, so.
Okay. All right. Talking with Mr. English, neighborhood cameras, getting information of him running, the audio, the 911, any other evidence that you reviewed before your arrest decision?
Well, again, like I said, we spoke with the family. We obtained background information on the victim. I don't recall. There may have been other investigative acts. I believe there were, but I do not recall them offhand.
Okay. Did you determine whether or not Mr. Arbery ran in a particular type of clothing or whether the cargo shorts was something that he would run in?
I did. Through the interviews that he would run in all types of clothing, and we established that later on in the investigation with numerous people and actually video of him running in similar clothing. He would run with whatever he had on.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you also testified on direct about Travis's background and being in the Coast Guard. What is it that you have done to look into Mr. McMichael's background?
Mr. McMichael's background, we have obtained his personnel record, his post record. We have requested his, what are you talking about, Greg McMichael? Okay.
I'm only going to be asking, unless I'll say Greg McMichael.
I'm sorry, I apologize for that. For Travis McMichael, we have requested and obtained his Coast Guard training record and file, I believe. We've requested, I believe we've actually obtained it.
Why did you do that?
To understand what training he has received, during his interview with Glenn County Police Department, he states that his position as a boarding officer, that he knew from 30 to 40 yards away that Ahmaud Arbery was not going to surrender, was going to keep coming. And through that statement, I wanted to know what his training and experience was.
Was that important that he told you that? Did you find that significant at all?
I did. It helped confirm what I saw in the video, that he was, when he got out, or when he's got the shotgun up, he's pointing it at him, and they helped confirm that to me.
Okay. And is it, that training, did you learn about what he actually did, what his job function was in the Coast Guard? I think you said boarding, or?
My understanding from his statements and from confirmation from the agent that had the file, that he was a boarding training, which is the person that goes on the boats to board them. Now, like I said, I have not reviewed his entire training file as of yet.
To do what? Board other boats to do what?
To take control of the boat.
On behalf of the Coast Guard?
Yes, sir.
Because of some activity, illegal activity or otherwise?
Yes, sir, to secure it for search or whatever else they would do. Sure.
I understand that you have said that Mr. Bryan has put this statement coming out of the mouth of Travis McMichael, this horrible thing. In looking so far in the case, whether it's on Travis's interaction through the neighborhood Facebook page or on his phone, have you seen any other evidence that he has used that horrible N-word anywhere else?
Yes, sir, many times.
Okay. And where?
There's on his Instagram post, he responds on one. I do not recall every time it was there, but I can give you some examples of numerous times. On the Instagram post, somebody sends him, this is on January 2nd of 2020, someone sends him a video or a picture. We were not able to recover that from the phone. That's one of the reasons why I have a search warrant out for Instagram. They send that out. He says, makes the comment, that would only be better if they'd have blown that effing N-words, or they'd blown that N-words head off.
So somebody sends him something,
And then he responds with that text.
and this is an Instagram that you've identified belonging to Travis McMichael.
It's correct. It was on his phone, too.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anywhere else that you've seen this?
Yes. There are several conversations, and I do not, they were on the phone. I do not remember if they were through instant messenger or through text. That I do not recall offhand.
Okay.
But one particular one that comes to mind is he made the statement that he loved his job because he was out on a boat and there weren't any N-words anywhere.
Did you get any information that he worked side by side with African Americans? Did you ever discover that in your work?
I don't recall. If,
Or that he had been awarded any accommodations for his work as a Coast Guard officer?
again, I haven't reviewed his Coast Guard file.
Okay. I think you talked about looking into Greg McMichael's background. I won't go into that, but let me move into then Satilla Shores neighborhood. We talked about several dates from Larry English's home, where there are videos of a suspect, a person going into the home. Do you recall the time of day that those things were happening?
I believe the video, well, again, there are several videos of different people going into the home. Not just
Talking about the children.
Okay, well, there's also a couple that goes into the home.
And that's one time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm not talking about the couple.
Okay. If you're talking about the individual Ahmaud Arbery, I believe the previous incident of being at the home was at night.
Okay. Is it your belief that it was Mr. Arbery going into the home on those other dates?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay, so on October 25th or November 18th, that was Mr. Arbery going into the home?
I don't remember the dates, but the other videos I've seen show Mr. Arbery, who I believe is Mr. Arbery, in the home, yes,
Why
sir.
do you believe that it's him? Why do you believe it's Mr. Arbery in the home?
Because I've seen him, and it looks like him to me in the video.
And if you don't mind just helping me understand, in what ways? What descriptors seem to match
His face, I believe there's tattoos that are seen.
up? Okay. All right, so you feel fairly certain based on face and the tattoos?
I do, yes, sir.
Did you get any information about why Mr. Arbery was in the homes on those previous occasions? Or whether his family knew that he was in the home on those previous occasions?
The interviews I did with the family, they did not know he was in the home on the previous occasions. Again, I got speculation, various people speculated of why he may be in there, from the fact I believe he had an interest in construction, to again the speculation that there is water there. But no one has a definitive fact they can offer to know exactly why, if that's your question.
Did you become aware that other neighbors in the Satilla Shore neighborhood believed that things had in fact been stolen from Mr. English on those occasions? Did other neighbors that you spoke to inform you that Mr. English had told them things were stolen on those occasions?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance. We still, I don't think we've even gotten to the date in question.
I'd like to ask a question.
Thank you.
I believe one neighbor mentioned that Mr. English had indicated that there was some tackle in a cooler that was taken from a boat, but Mr. English's statement is that the boat, while he noticed the items were missing while the boat was parked at the residence, he parked the boat in a different county, so he doesn't really know where they went missing from. And at the time that Mr. English first noticed them missing, he believed it was workers at his house installing an HVAC unit that had taken it from the boat. But he can't say where it's gone.
I guess my question is, are you aware whether or not there are neighbors reporting that back in October or November that Mr. English had told them, I had a suspect in my house last night and I had some things stolen? Are you aware of that?
I am not, no, sir.
So you've not spoken with any neighbors that have said, Larry English told me that he had things stolen?
I have not spoken with it, and I'm not aware of an agent that has spoken to someone other than what I just described to you.
What about from Travis McMichael? Did he tell you that he had been informed that things had been stolen on those prior occasions? Not on the 11th, but on those prior occasions.
Travis McMichael chose not to do an interview with me, sir.
Okay. His interview with Glenn County Police Department, did they ask or did he disclose during that interview that he had been told or he was under the belief that things had been stolen from Mr. English previously in October and November of 19?
No, again, during his interview, he was not even aware that Ahmaud Arbery was seen inside the house on the day in question.
I know that's the day in question, but I'm
But
talking about previous.
I'm trying to answer your question,
Oh,
Counselor.
my apologies.
Okay. What he's told Glenn County PD, to the best of my recollection during his interview, was that he knew that a lot of stuff had been, burglaries and thefts had happened in the neighborhood in the past 6 to 7 months, which is the reason why we went back and pulled all the call reports going back to July 1st of 2019 to see if in fact there had been. And we also did a neighborhood canvass out there, and that's one of the questions we asked. Had you had anything stolen?
What did you learn had been stolen over that 6-month period of time in that neighborhood, in that area?
There were 2 entering autos. There was 1 theft, again, from a bedroom. And then there was 1 call of a burglary, but no subsequent report of that.
What about stolen firearms?
Well, and one of the entering the autos was Travis McMichael's firearm was taken.
Were you aware of any other firearms that were taken out of cars in that time period?
I am not, no, sir.
And, okay, you're not aware of that.
I'm not aware of that.
Were you given any information that Greg McMichaels had been told that things were stolen from Larry English's house previously back in October or November of 2019? Whether you were told yourself or you reviewed it from the Glenn County Police Department?
From the Glenn County Police Department interview that he did at the Glenn County Police Department, he said he didn't think anything had been, he knew nothing had been taken on February 11th. He didn't think anything had been taken from the house by Mr. Arbery. He said he can't be sure. If it had to have been early on, but he didn't think so.
Did you have any information that the neighborhood Facebook group, including Mr. McMichaels and his father, had come to the opinion that there was one particular suspect who continued to go into Mr. English's house? I know you've testified now that you believe it was Mr. Arbery, but did you get information that they had collectively formed the opinion that the same guy is coming back?
Yes, sir, I believe so. I
Okay.
believe that's correct.
And that they were trying to catch essentially Mr. Arbery?
Yes, sir. They decided he was someplace he shouldn't be, and they were attempting to catch him. Yes.
And that they had involved the police in those efforts over the period of 2019 and 2020.
Yes, sir. Mr. English and Mr. Diego, I believe, called the police, and Travis McMichael called on February 11th, 2020.
And then up until that time, I guess, leading up to February 11th, that nobody had really been caught that matched the description of the person in the home.
Yes, sir. I don't believe anybody had been caught or even confronted with it.
At any point in time.
No, sir.
Moving to the 11th of February, what is it that you understood from Travis McMichael's, through your review of the file, that he observed that night and that he thought that night what he observed about Mr. Aubrey?
He saw Mr. Aubrey in the neighborhood. He said he was actually turned around and has his headlights, if I recall correctly, illuminated Mr. Aubrey. Mr. Aubrey took a position. There's a porta potty in front of the house because it's under construction. And it appeared to him that Mr. Aubrey was trying to hide in the shadow. He said Mr. Aubrey was grabbing his pants, his pocket. Mr. Travis Michael said, and this is the interview he did with Glenn County Police Department on the 23rd, his concern was there may have been a gun.
Could you explain why he was concerned about that on that evening?
Because Mr. Aubrey grabbed his pants in that particular.
Grabbed his pants? I think
he said pocket, the way Mr. Aubrey grabbed his pants, Mr. Travis McMichael was concerned there may be a firearm.
Okay.
He called 911 and returned to his house, where him and his father then went over to Mr. English's house to try to confront the individual. He had seen the individual go in the house. I'm sorry, I left that part out. After the grab, he saw the individual go into Mr. English's house.
And this is all information that you're aware of prior to making your arrest decision on the 7th? Is that
Yes, sir. That's correct.
At any point in time, did you consider that Travis and Greg and Michael were honestly seeking to apprehend a person that they thought was burglarizing and breaking into homes and cars in the neighborhood?
No, I consider that they thought they were trying to catch the person that they believed may be responsible for what occurred so that they could detain him and identify him and let the police show up and identify him. Yes, sir.
And do you believe, based on what you've heard, that that's what they were trying to do on the 23rd, that they were trying to detain and identify this person?
I don't know if I've formed that opinion yet, no, sir. I'm still under investigation, but I know that's what their statement on the 23rd was.
That's what they shared with police, is that they were trying to do what they had been trying to do, which was to detain and identify this person.
That's correct, yes, sir.
You say that you're thinking about that, and whether that's true or not, you haven't formed your final opinion on that.
I am just gathering the facts, sir, and my investigation is not complete. So,
is it important for you, as you're gathering the facts in your investigation, to answer that question in your mind?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of this line of questioning. The question is about probable cause for the issuance of these arrest warrants for the defendants in this case, and not about speculating about what might be in the defendant's mind or anything like that.
I think that's a good objection. I will sustain it.
I'll move on now. On the 23rd, is it your thought, do you understand are you aware of the citizen's arrest law?
I am, yes, sir.
Is it your position that they were not seeking to try to use the citizen's arrest law on the 23rd against Mr. Aubrey?
So Judge, I'm going to object again for the same basis. I think that will call for speculation as to what the defendants were trying to do. I don't mind the defense asking what the defendant said. That's a different story. That's a fact matter, which might be a component of the investigation. But to ask anyone to speculate about what might be in the defendant's mind, I don't think that that's pertinent, and it is speculative, and we would reject.
Unless you have an opinion about that.
That's this officer who's making the call, Your Honor. I'm asking him.
If he has an opinion,
Did you form an opinion or think before you made the arrest warrant that these two gentlemen could have been trying to make a citizen's arrest?
I was concerned whether their actions were legal and they had the authority to do it, not really so much what their intention was, but whether their actions were legal.
And their actions being trying to stop a person that they believed had been burglarizing their neighborhood.
Trying to stop a person, pointing a shotgun, ordering the person to get on the ground, and subsequently killing that person. Yes, sir.
I understand the end of what happened, but I guess my question is, from the moment that you understand the McMichaels left their driveway, let me back up. We'll get into it. You had mentioned, I had asked you about the Barnhill letter, and we were talking about Mr. Arbery. Is any part of your investigation, well, in the Barnhill letter, do you recall reading where George Barnhill mentioned part of the reason that he wasn't going forward was because of mental health issues?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of that, and it's also the character of the victim, so I don't think it's pertinent.
I don't really understand. Who he's even talking about?
Yeah, I'll rephrase, John. You recall in the Barnhill letter that there's mentioned by Mr. Barnhill that Mr. Arbery had some mental health problems.
Objection as to relevance and character of the victim.
Well, this is going into the
I'm going to let you ask that.
what happened that day. I'm just asking if you were aware of that mention.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. And have you done anything to investigate that statement by Mr. Barnhill?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay. And what have you discovered?
Judge, same objection. It's not pertinent to what happened on February 23rd, 2020, and it's character of the victim potentially.
I don't think it's character.
Well, I mean, bad things happen out there.
I agree.
And his mental status, I'm not sure that's pertinent.
If I may respond.
So let's go to something else.
May I just respond here
Yeah.
to make the reason I'm asking is, it's my understanding that the testimony thus far on direct has been about the interaction between Mr. Arbery and Travis McMichael and how that interaction has ebbed and flowed across an entire neighborhood. There's been opinion testimony given by the very beginning by the prosecutor that this was a chase and a hunting and an execution. And really, what we're talking about here is the interaction of two men.
That's not what we're talking about.
Sorry?
That's not what we're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about whether or not, what the answers to the question about, is there anything about the mental history that could have played a role in this interaction that would ultimately go to the question of whether this was a case of self-defense and not a case of felony murder and aggravated assault. So that would be the reason I would ask the question.
All right, I'll let you ask that question.
Judge, I do want to point out there's no evidence before the court. I understand that these defendants even knew what history the deceased victim in this case has. So this serves no purpose other than to cast his character into question, and we object on that basis.
Well, it certainly is almost immaterial, but I'll let you go ahead.
What did you want to say?
Through interviews and review of mental health records, we learned that Mr. Arbery had previously been diagnosed with a mental illness. I believe it was, I'm not 100% sure on what the exact diagnosis was.
And what were the features of that mental illness?
I believe at the time he was having auditory hallucinations, is the best I can recall, back when he had the mental health diagnosis.
When was that diagnosis?
I don't recall the date.
Do you have your file where you might be able to review that?
I do not believe it's in my file. That's in the Glenn County Police Department file. I have requested that another subpoena be issued for the mental health records in their entirety. The ones I reviewed was in the Glenn County Police Department file.
Okay, and who is it, what officer in Glenn County was the one that uncovered that or was diving into that issue?
I believe it was requested from the coroner's office to obtain a subpoena for the mental health records. I don't remember which officer.
You can't identify for us which Glenn County officer had gathered that information?
It came from the coroner's office. I do not know which officer entered it into the Glenn County Police Department file.
It came from the coroner's office. Do you know the provider of the records?
It's the local mental health facility. I don't know the name of it offhand. I don't know if it's Gateway or by the Sea or something like that. I do not know.
And to try to help where I was ultimately going with this, is there any evidence that you've collected that mental illness was active and still ongoing or being treated on February 23rd or right before February 23rd? Do you have any information about that?
The information I have that he was not currently under treatment for the mental illness.
Not receiving medications or anything like that?
And that's my understanding from discussions with the family and from the records that I have.
Okay, I understand. As you were investigating and reviewing documents, were you trying to make a determination before the arrest decision of whether or not this could be a case of self-defense?
We were collecting all the facts we had available. Then, when we had a meeting with the district attorney, presented those facts, had a discussion. I mean, I don't know if there was an ongoing...
You discussed it
Yes, sir.
about whether or not this was a case of self-defense.
Yes, sir. That was part of the discussion.
And what are the facts and factors did you discuss that supported that this would be a case of self-defense?
That supported it?
Yes, sir.
It was just their contention that... It was their contention that, at least on the second and third shot, that he was striking Travis McMichael. Again, Travis McMichael is not clear. He says they were tangled up, but he's not clear on the first shot that there was actually any physical violence done to him as far as a strike. He first says he shoots when Ahmaud Arbery squares up with him. Then I believe the statement is Ahmaud Arbery was rear back going to hit him, and then there's a statement that he may have had his hand on his shirt. Travis McMichael says that adrenaline was pumping and it all happened very quickly. I mean, as that answers your question. I mean, that's...
Yeah, were there any other facts that you considered where you discussed with the district attorney, this supports that Travis McMichael was using self-defense on that day?
I mean, his contention, that was his contention, and yeah, that's the facts that we had.
Okay. You've mentioned a couple of times that there was, it seemed to be Travis was saying, and maybe even on the video, that Mr. Arbery was striking Travis. Can you give us a little more details about what it is you understood happened with the striking?
And
when it happened?
Mr. Arbery was well, it depends on whose statement. Again, Greg McMichael, he only says there's two shots, and he indicates that they're striking, I believe, before the first shot.
Okay.
Travis McMichael, again, says that he fired the first shot into Ahmaud Arbery's chest, says that he cannot be sure Ahmaud Arbery had struck him then, or had his hand on his shirt, or, he's very unclear about that. He does know that after shooting him, that Travis McMichael backed up, and Ahmaud Arbery was striking him.
Did you see evidence of that on Travis McMichael?
He points out, and they took photographs of his face. I didn't see any visible injuries to him.
Who's they?
The Glenn County Police Department.
And you have those photographs?
They are in the Glenn County Police Department file.
Okay. Was EMS on the scene as well?
Yes, and we've interviewed the EMS, and I do not believe they offered any treatment for that. They were also trying to wash the blood off of Travis McMichael, I believe. But I think they did have him checked out because he said he was struck to the responding Glenn County Police Department officers. Again, I did not see any marks on him, but in the video you can see Ahmaud Arbery striking him.
In the Facebook group posts where they're discussing about the break-ins and the burglaries, did you find anything within the Facebook group itself that they were making explicit racial comments about these things, or whether they were simply discussing what was happening? Did you find anything in those posts?
I don't recall seeing anything explicitly racial in the Satilla Shores Facebook posts.
They were seeking simply to figure out what was going on in the neighborhood.
Well, and it's not just break-ins. They posted a lot of stuff on there happens in the neighborhood. I mean, somebody's got stuff for sale or something like that. It's not solely focused on criminal activity or break-ins.
When you spoke with, or when you reviewed Travis's statement or his father's statement, and I apologize if you've said this already, Did they tell police that when they saw Mr. Arbery running past their house, that they in fact believed he was the person that had been in the neighborhood, in the homes late at night previously?
Greg McMichael said that during his statement, that he recognized him and that he went, as far as that person, he did not know him before that incident, according to Greg McMichael. When they asked Travis McMichael, when he called up to Mr. Arbery in the truck, he's almost 100% sure, I think was his statement, that was the individual that he had seen on video and from the February 11th incident.
Did you learn about Travis's kind of mental state on February 11th when he responded and called the police, whether or not he was frightened or scared?
Judge, I reject the call for speculation about what a defendant is feeling tonight.
I didn't ask him to speculate, Your Honor. I asked him if he said whether or not he was frightened or scared at that time.
I'm sorry.
You may answer.
I don't recall any statement he made about that.
Have you listened to the 911 call from February 11th?
I believe so, but I don't recall that statement in it.
You don't remember whether or not Travis sounded frightened or whether he said he was scared or reported that he was scared on that night?
I don't remember that. No, sir.
I don't remember.
No, don't remember.
Okay. Your Honor, I just wanted, I'm aware at the time, I wasn't sure if you were going to be breaking, but I'm going to move into using the map. I'm going to come up there, but I didn't know if you were going to take a break or not, Your Honor.
Much more time do you think for this witness?
It's probably another hour, if you'll allow.
You know, to the extent you care, I usually take my lunch at 12. I think you're at 1 o'clock lunch person, but if we're going to go another hour, I would really prefer to have a break.
Well, actually, I'm a 12 o'clock person.
Oh, I was wrong.
Well, what would you all like to do? Would you all like to continue now for until 1 o'clock?
I'm happy to do it.
All
Whoever
right,
the court wants to do it.
Let's do that.
Okay. I approach the witness, Your Honor. I don't think this gets us tall. Bob? Yeah. Gerald. Special Agent, we're going to bring the poster back up.
Okay.
Is that oriented the right way, the way we had before?
Maybe that.
Yep. Okay. And Bob, if you'll tilt it down. More. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So, I think your testimony is that there is a video that picks up Mr. Arbery as he comes into or onto Satilla Drive. Is that correct?
There is a video of him from across the street from the house under construction, which is approximately here, that sees him come into frame traveling in this
Whose
direction.
video camera is that?
I can't recall his name. It's his house across the street.
And you've now got a copy of that entire video, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And on the video, what does it show Mr. Arbery is doing as he approaches the house? Is he walking or is he running?
I don't recall.
How's that?
I don't remember if he was walking or running. I remember him coming into frame, but I don't remember if he was in a jog or running or walking.
Well, you testified that you believe he was on a jog, but you're saying you don't remember whether he was on a jog?
No, sir. You asked me when he comes into frame, what is he doing?
And how much space do you have as he comes into frame? About how many feet of frame does he, or how many feet of road do you think that he uses as he comes up to the house?
I couldn't estimate that, sir.
Don't know.
Couldn't estimate it, no, sir.
Have you sought to measure any of these distances as part of your investigation up to this point?
There has been a scan done involving a three-dimensional Leica scanner done, which includes measurements all around.
I'm sorry, what kind of scanner?
A Leica scanner,
Okay.
which does three-dimensional measurements using lasers
Okay.
of that area. There has also been a drone flight through to help show distances.
Great. Okay. And then I think you said that he enters into 220 Satilla at that time.
Yes, sir, he does.
And that's where we pick up with the video showing him walking into the house. Is that
He,
correct?
he enters the house, yes, right? So I don't know if he comes into frame running or jogging, but he goes into the house. That's correct.
Okay. I think you testified there was an individual that called the police and came outside.
Yes.
Mr. Albenzi, is that sound right?
Yeah, Albanese, something like that, yes, sir.
Any information about whether or not Mr. Albenzi shouted across the street to Mr. Arbery or said anything to Mr. Arbery?
No, sir. My understanding is he did not.
He did not say anything.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay. And he calls the police, and at some point, I think you testified that Mr. Arbery then runs out of the house.
Yes, sir. He comes out the door and runs, which is what he has been seen to do on previous video.
Coming out of that house and running.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And he runs out of the house down, does he just run down the driveway and into the road, or does he cut across the yard? Do you notice?
I don't recall that. I don't recall.
And he begins to make his way down in front of 230 Satilla Drive, which is Greg McMichael's home. Is that what you testified to?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What is it that you understand Greg McMichael sees, observes, and says at that moment when he's out in his driveway?
My understanding, he sees Mr. Aubrey running past. According to Greg McMichael's statement, again, he doesn't know if Mr. Aubrey's chasing somebody or somebody's chasing him, but he recognized him as the person that's been in the house previously, and says that he suspects that Mr. Aubrey may have been involved in thefts in the past.
Okay.
So he goes into the house and tells Travis that's him, and then they get the guns and proceed to get in the truck and chase Mr. Aubrey.
I think you testified that Greg McMichael's former law enforcement officer and investigator from the DA's office.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And he is expressing to the police these statements back on February 23rd that it's his belief at the moment Mr. Arbery runs past that he thinks that is the individual that's been burglarizing and committing thefts in the neighborhood.
No, that is not correct.
I thought that's what you just said.
No, sir.
Okay.
He says that's the individual that he had seen in the house.
Okay.
He believes, he has a gut instinct that this person may have been responsible, although he's gotten, and I think he actually says, I've got no proof of that, but this person may have been responsible for various crimes in the neighborhood.
Okay. And did you get an understanding of where he came to that feeling or belief from?
Just his explanation of Glenn County Police Department, like I said, I think he actually says it's a hunch. They go into it's just like a subjective just reasoning. He says, my reasoning is there's thefts going on and somebody's in a house under construction. So they're probably or possibly the person that may have been doing these thefts.
Would you consider it significant if Larry English had in fact told him that he had thousands of dollars worth of fishing equipment and electronics stolen from his boat around the time of October or November of 2019?
I would find it astonishing considering that Mr. McMichael tells them that he did not think anything was stolen from the house on February 23rd, 2020 during the interview with the Glenn County Police Department. So I would think that would be a change. If he came out and said that now, I believe that would be a change in the statement he gave on the day of the murder.
Okay. Would you, okay, but, all right, we move on. So then after he runs past, you said that Mr. McMichael goes in the house and gets Travis.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And what do you understand happens next?
Mr. McMichael grabs his Greg McMichael grabs his .357 Magnum revolver. Travis McMichael grabs a 12-gauge 870 shotgun. They then get into Travis McMichael's truck. Travis McMichael driving, Greg McMichael in the passenger seat.
Let me stop you there if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Did they explain or give any information as to why they grabbed their firearms?
Yeah, I believe Greg McMichael explains that, again, this is an individual that had been in the house over here and they didn't know if he was armed or not. So they grabbed weapons.
Did they at all reference the February 11th evening where they thought that he may be armed because he had been motioning to his pocket or reaching in his pocket? And
Yes, sir, I believe that was brought up during those interviews, yes, sir.
And that they were afraid that the same guy may have been armed.
Well, yeah, they mentioned that, but Greg Michael also says that his gut instinct, again, was this person may have been the individual that went into Travis McMichael's truck and stole a firearm. However, he said he had no evidence of that. He had no objective reasoning for that. I believe they were going into subjective versus objective information. And but that his just gut instinct.
Okay, but subjectively he believed, is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. That's what he said, not what I'm saying.
They get in the car, and I think you say that Greg McMichael sat in the front passenger seat, but there was a baby seat in there?
That's correct, yes, sir.
But he rode in that sort of capacity up to a certain point, is that right?
Yes, sir. According to his and Travis Michael's statement, he rode into that until this location on Burford, where Mr. Aubrey turned and went back in the opposite direction.
So when they got in the car, what is it that you understood that they could still see Mr. Aubrey running in that direction, or that they just drove forward to see if they could find him? Did they still have eyes on him, I guess is my question.
I don't believe that question was specifically asked of them, whether they still had eyes on him or not.
But they drove down Burford.
Well, they drove down Satilla first and then on to Burford.
I think you were saying Buford earlier.
I'm sorry.
You mean Burford.
I meant Burford, yes, sir. I apologize if I misspoke on Buford.
And then, at some point, you learned that the McMichaels see Mr. Aubrey running down Burford. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. According to both their statements, they catch up to him.
Okay. Now, I think you testified that you got a video from Mr. Bryan that comes from cameras on his home.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Have you reviewed that video?
I have, sir.
Okay. And do you see Mr. Aubrey run past the house?
The video is apparently motion activated, so when it starts, you see, if I recall correctly, Travis McMichael's truck and Mr. Aubrey running from the front of the truck towards the back of the truck, and then it looks like he's changing direction, and then the video stops.
Okay. So where is Mr. Bryan's house on that map?
I think it's approximately right here.
Okay. And so when the camera initiates, it is when the McMichael's truck is in the view. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Is it stopped?
It appears to be at that point, yes, sir. It stopped, or it has comes into view. It is stopped. Mr. Aubrey changes direction, and I believe he changes direction again, and then that's when the camera shuts off. And then it goes from the statement with Travis and Greg that they continue to pursue him this way.
All right. So when Travis's truck is stopped, which you understand, where is Mr. Aubrey?
He is on the driver's side, I believe, running back towards the rear of the truck. And I don't recall if the truck begins to move backwards at that point, but then Mr. Aubrey changes direction again, I believe, in the video. It's a very short snippet of video.
So if the driver's side, if this is the driver's side truck and Travis is sitting here in the truck, do you have any information that Travis is pointing a gun out the window?
Do I have information?
Yeah, do you have any information, or is it on video that Travis is holding a gun out the window?
I do not see any video of Travis holding the gun out the window of that video at that time.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Does the video have audio?
We'll get back to you.
Oh, yes. I'll do it. Does the video have audio?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
Okay. Did you get any information from Travis or from Greg McMichaels that they were trying to speak to Mr. Aubrey at that time without pointing any gun at him, but just talking to him?
Yeah, I believe they were ordering him to stop at that point. Then later Travis says his statement changes a little bit. At first it was we were telling him to stop, and then it was we were saying, hey, we just want to talk with you. So
Are those two things inconsistent in your mind? Stop, hey, we want to talk to you. You seem to think that those are inconsistent with one another.
I do.
Okay.
Just from my interpretation of the interview. Yes, sir.
But at that moment, saying to Mr. Aubrey, stop, we want to talk to you, there's nothing illegal about that.
Not at that point, no, sir. Not just saying that, no.
Right. And so, without a show of guns or force, you said that Mr. Aubrey then begins to run what appears to be back the other direction?
Well, yes,
Towards
sir.
Satilla?
Well, it looks like to me he's running back for Satilla, and then, like I said, I can't recall if the truck starts backing up, but then he changes direction again. From the video, it's very obvious to me at that point Mr. Aubrey is trying to escape from Travis and Greg
Now,
McMichael.
you're getting into the mind of Mr. Aubrey right now, aren't you?
No,
You're getting
sir. No, sir. I'm telling you what my interpretation of what I say on the video is.
And tell us what you're basing that interpretation on. What facts do you think support that he is at that moment trying to escape?
Because he looks like he's running away.
He's running away from the truck,
And then I believe the truck starts to back up, and then he changes direction to get back away from
and
them.
he comes back toward the truck? Or
As the truck was moving this way, I believe so, sir. Yes.
Okay. At this point in time, do you know where Mr. Bryan's truck is and whether it's come out of the driveway or not?
It has not. It is in video frame, parked in the driveway.
Okay, so as you're trying to interpret the running away aspects of what Mr. Aubrey is doing, you're not saying that he ran this way, then stopped because he saw Mr. Bryan's truck and ran back.
No, sir.
You're just seeing him sort of change directions and hover around that area.
No, sir. My interpretation is that he's changing direction because the truck was going backwards.
Okay.
He's trying to escape the truck
So the truck's going backwards and he decides to run back in front of the truck
to get away from it. That is my interpretation of it.
and not back out Satilla Shores.
I think he's just trying to get out of the truck. Now, when they come down here, he turns and then tries to go back out Satilla Shores.
All right. So once Mr. Aubrey runs away from that, what do you think happens next?
Well, it's based upon the statements of Travis and Greg McMichael,
Okay.
but that Ahmaud Aubrey travels down Burford, with Travis and Greg McMichael in pursuit. They get here, again, Mr. Aubrey changes direction and tries to go back towards Satilla.
Okay.
This is at this point, Greg McMichael exits the passenger side of the truck. He starts to go back down Buford, but Mr. Aubrey is running back down Burford. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
At this point, Mr. Bryan pulls his vehicle to try to block the road, to block Mr. Aubrey in. This is his first attempt.
Let me stop you there if you don't mind, so I can follow you. It's Mr. McMichael's Travis has said that Mr. Aubrey ran in front of his car and headed further down Burford, and they drove in his direction at that time.
They're pursuing him, yes, sir.
Did they tell you whether or not they continued to say to him, please stop, we want to talk to you?
Well, they didn't
Any
tell me.
statements?
Well, they didn't give a statement to me.
Well, I'm sorry, I apologize, you're right. I'm sorry. They gave this statement to Glenn County, but I keep calling you Glenn County and you're not. I apologize.
Yes, sir.
That they gave this statement to Glenn County that they continue to try to engage him and ask him to stop and say, we just want to talk to you.
I don't recall them making that statement at this point in the
I
narration.
don't remember that.
No, sir, I don't remember.
Okay. Nonetheless, at some point, you don't have any information at this point that on that second encounter, which I'll call it the second encounter on Burford, where they kind of drove up to him before Mr. Aubrey changed directions back, that they pointed any guns at him at that time.
At this time?
When they followed Mr. Aubrey further down Burford and they re-engaged and then he took off running back down towards Satilla, that they pulled out any guns at that time.
Neither one of those, neither Greg McMichael nor Travis McMichael confessed to that during the interview. That Glenn County
Using the word
Police.
confess, I'm just saying, did they say that they took their guns out or not?
Well, that would be a confession. If they said they pointed a gun at him like you described earlier, that would be a crime, in my opinion, which would be a confession.
Okay. But you don't have any information that they did pull guns out? No other videos or anything like that?
No, sir. I do not.
And I understand that Mr. Aubrey is running back, which I'll call up Burford towards Satilla.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at this point in time, you said that Mr. Bryan has pulled his truck straight out.
According to his statement and the Travis and Greg McMichael, yes, he is trying to block the road to block in Mr. Aubrey.
So you're saying there's a statement from Mr. Bryan where he says that he is in fact trying to block Mr. Aubrey from leaving.
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
correct.
And that when he does that, what happens?
As far as with Mr. Aubrey?
Yes,
Or,
sir.
okay. Mr. Aubrey, my understanding, goes around the truck and in to get around the edge of it, at which point, from my understanding from Mr. Bryan, he then goes in pursuit and tries several other times to try to block in Mr. Aubrey with his vehicle.
And you testified a little bit about finding some white cotton fibers along the edge of the truck, a dent in the truck, some palm slides across the And I think you testified that Mr. Bryan said that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver door of the truck.
He did. At one point, Mr. Bryan stated that Mr. Aubrey was moving along the truck, the driver's side of the truck. He interpreted that movement as Mr. Aubrey may be trying to reach the door handle and open the truck, so he gunned the truck and shot forward.
Did he explain what he was thinking or feeling as Mr. Arbery was trying to reach in the truck, whether he was fearful or that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to steal his truck or carjack him or anything like that?
I don't recall him even making any kind of statement of that. But that is, again, after he's trying to block him in. And subsequent to that, he continued to pursue him and try to block him
Okay,
in.
fair. But you're saying there's no statement by Mr. Bryan that he feared Mr. Arbery was trying to get in his truck?
I'm saying I don't recall any statement that I have reviewed
You don't
of that.
Okay. Do you need your case file? Because a lot of the answers we're starting to get are I don't remember, I don't recall.
No, sir. I did not do the interview with Mr. Bryan, so I cannot answer something that I have not reviewed the recording of or the interview of him. You're asking me, has he said that? I can only tell you to what I have knowledge of.
All right. So you haven't really completed your review of even the video and the interview of Mr.
No.
Bryan?
Sir, my agent has interviewed him. He's reported back to me of what it is. He has to complete a report, which is attached. And then at that point, I will sign off on the report and attach it. That's part of the process. However, you're asking me specific details about an interview that I was not present at, nor did I review a video on. So I cannot be definitive to say he has not said something if I was not there. I do not want to misspeak.
I got it. And now I understand that you haven't reviewed the video of the interview. I understand that.
Sir, I don't even know if there is a video. It could have been audio of the interview my agent did with him.
Okay, but I now understand you haven't reviewed that yet, and that's
Yes,
why
sir.
your answer is I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it significant to you at all if Mr. Arbery would be trying to break into that truck with Mr. Bryan?
No, sir. Again, at this point, I think Mr. Aubrey's trying to escape. I would say that he's trying to get away. And Mr. Bryan continues to pursue him and try to block him in again. So
So he's trying to get away from Mr.
You
Bryan.
didn't finish his answer.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead. sir.
okay, yes. You're asking me if it's significant whether or not he was trying to open the driver's side of the door. My answer is that no, because I think Mr. Aubrey is motivated by a desire to flee based upon all the information that this has. Also, Mr. Bryan continued to pursue him and try to block him in after that.
Is it
It's my understanding.
Okay. Is it your understanding or your opinion that Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver's side of Mr. Bryan's truck so that he could use it to flee?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think it's been asked and answered, and I don't believe it's pertinent to the issue of probable cause as to the issuance of the arrest warrant.
Is there some reason we just don't play the interview?
No, sit down.
Your Honor, I just understood that his testimony on direct was about this interaction, and I'm just trying to find.
I don't even know if there is a video. It could have been audio of the interview my agent did with him.
Okay, but I now understand you haven't reviewed that yet, and that's
Yes,
why
sir.
your answer is I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it significant to you at all if Mr. Arbery would be trying to break into that truck with Mr. Bryan?
No, sir. Again, at this point, I think Mr. Aubrey's trying to escape. I would say that he's trying to get away. And Mr. Bryan continues to pursue him and try to block him in again. So
So he's trying to get away from Mr.
You
Bryan.
didn't finish his answer.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead. sir.
okay, yes. You're asking me if it's significant whether or not he was trying to open the driver's side of the door. My answer is that no, because I think Mr. Aubrey is motivated by a desire to flee based upon all the information that this has. Also, Mr. Bryan continued to pursue him and try to block him in after that.
Is it
It's
your
my understanding.
Okay. Is it your understanding or your opinion that Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver's side of Mr. Bryan's truck so that he could use it to flee?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think it's been asked and answered, and I don't believe it's pertinent to the issue of probable cause as to the issuance of the arrest warrant.
Is there some reason we just don't play the interview?
No, sit down.
Your Honor, I just understood that his testimony on direct was about this interaction, and I'm just trying to follow up on his direct
All
testimony.
right.
So is it your belief or understanding, because you're saying that you believe Mr. Arbery was trying to escape?
It is my
Are you
belief.
saying that he's trying to get into Mr. Bryan's truck and take it over so he can escape?
No, sir. Mr. Bryan indicated that he interpreted Mr. Aubrey's actions as trying to open the door.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion whether that was actually true or not. I'm just telling you, my opinion is that at this point, Mr. Aubrey is trying to escape.
Okay. Did Mr. Bryan say that Mr. Arbery intentionally committed damage to his truck? That he attacked his truck?
Yeah, I don't recall. I don't recall being told whether the. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that answer.
Following this exchange, I guess, between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck, what happens next as far as you know?
My understanding is Mr. Bryan continues to pursue Mr. Aubrey up Burford. When it comes to Holmes Road, Mr. Aubrey turns onto Holmes Road. Mr. Bryan initially is on Satilla Drive. He turns and then goes down Holmes Road in pursuit.
Okay, may I stop you for just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any information that Mr. Bryan was communicating with Travis or Greg about the next steps that played out between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan? That Mr. Bryan was saying he's going on Holmes now. That there was any calls or communication between them?
I do not have any information about that. That's right.
Or that, okay. And you said that Mr. Bryan goes straight down Satilla, essentially, but
Well,
Mr. Arbery turns right on Holmes.
I think he's pursuing, my interpretation is that he overshoots when Mr. Aubrey cuts suddenly down Holmes to try to get away, and then Mr. Bryan had to turn back to continue pursuit.
Do you have any information that Travis or Greg saw where Mr. Arbery went, whether it was Satilla or Holmes or otherwise?
No, from the interviews, it appears to me that Travis McMichael's intention was to come back through Zellwood and try to cut Mr. Aubrey off here, with Mr. Bryan here and Mr. Travis and catch him between them here. That's my understanding from the interview.
Right, so your understanding is that, what information do you have that Travis McMichael said, I'm going to go up this direction and come down Holmes because I know I can catch Mr. Arbery there? How is it that he is informed, in your opinion, that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I say that he's wanting to catch Mr. Aubrey here, but when he comes down Holmes Road, he sees Mr. Aubrey.
You think he sees him?
Yes, sir. I believe he says that in his interview.
Okay, so when he comes on Holmes Road, he says he sees him on Holmes Road. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Well, the shooting took place on Holmes Road as well. So during the interview, my understanding is that he sees him here on Holmes Road. But again, like I said, he definitely says he sees him on Holmes Road. He shoots him on Holmes Road. It's his statement.
So, let me just break this down because I want to make sure I understand. Prior to seeing him on Holmes Road, do you have any information that Travis McMichael is aware that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I think from the interview I got is that he's wanting to loop around and catch him here. Again, that's my interpretation of what he is telling the investigator of the Glenn County Police Department.
That he wants to go all the way around to come back to Burford?
And catch him, yes, sir.
And not just back down Burford?
Well, Greg McMichael encourages him to back down Burford and catch him, but Travis says, no, it's loop around.
Okay. But prior to that, you don't have any information that Travis knows Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road. Is that correct?
Not until he sees him on Holmes Road.
And then he comes up and he turns on Holmes Road and he sees him where you were pointing to, higher up Holmes Road. Is that right?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
He drives on the road and physically sees him up there.
I believe so because Mr. Bryan is here. Well, it's probably not that far down. Mr. Bryan is here, and this is where the video starts, and Mr. Aubrey coming back towards Mr. Bryan. At that point, Mr. Bryan puts the phone down. He then pulls off the road to allow Travis McMichael's truck to pass.
Did Travis McMichaels ever say to you, or Greg say to you, that he observed the interaction between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck around the end there of Burford Road, or that he may have seen Mr. Arbery attacking the truck or acting in an odd manner about the truck?
Well, again, they didn't make the statement to me. They made it to Glenn County Police Department.
I understand, yeah.
I do not recall them making any kind of statement about seeing him try to attack Mr.
Arbery's truck, Mr. Bryan's truck on Burford.
I don't believe I do not recall them making any statement in reference to that.
And then I think what you've said is that you believe Mr. McMichael sees Mr. Arbery on the upper part of the road, and then is it that they drive past Mr. Arbery?
And that part is not clear in the interview, exactly how they got in front of Mr. Arbery, and it's not really addressed in the interview. That is just me knowing that they're behind him at this point, and at this point they're in front of him. So at some point they had to pass him, but that is not addressed in the interview.
And do you have any information? Okay. So you don't have any information about what kind of interaction, if any, there was if they go past him or whatnot?
It's not mentioned in the interview.
And to make sure, throughout this entire time, do you have any evidence of any kind of texting communications between the McMichaels and Mr. Bryan or anybody else in the neighborhood as they're trying to communicate about Mr. Arbery, where he is and how they can, stop him or catch him, as you put it?
I have no evidence of that at this point, no, sir.
There's a moment where you talk about Mr. Bryan's video and he starts running his cell phone. Where do you believe he starts to turn on his cell phone and record?
And it's hard for me to do it on this map. I believe it's somewhere in this area, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I know it's before this curve here, but I believe it's somewhere in this area.
Okay. And can you hear Mr. Bryan say anything throughout that recording?
I believe he makes a statement speaking to himself at one point and it's after he's put the phone down, I believe. He makes some kind of statement, and I don't remember his exact words, but something along the lines of, I'm going to go on, or something like that.
Okay. I thought I recalled you testifying that Mr. Bryan may have said something to the effect of, do you got him, or block him in, or something like that. Where do you hear that statement being made?
Well, I don't hear that. That's the statement that he says he made.
Oh, so he says, Mr. Bryan says, that
Yeah.
he
that when he first sees them before he gets in his truck in pursuit, he asks the people in the truck, which is Travis McMichael, and I don't even know if he saw Greg at that point, but Travis McMichael in the truck that's pursuing him on Auburn, he asks, "Do you got him?"
He says that's what he says to
Yes,
Greg
sir.
or Travis.
Yes, sir. I believe that's something to that effect. Anyway, I believe that's what he says.
You also mentioned that you think Mr. Arbery ran into a ditch somewhere, or ran down into a ditch. Where is that?
I'm not clear. I believe that's on Burford, and that's from Mr.
Mr. Bryan?
Bryan. Thank you. My mind slipped. From Bryan's statement that he made that Mr. Albury kept going into the ditch to get around his vehicle. He was trying to cut him off and block him
Is
in.
this the statement that he made originally to the Glenn County Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Once the video picks up, and I think you say we see Mr. Arbery running towards Travis McMichael's truck. That truck is parked. Mr. Arbery wrote the video that Mr. Bryan had.
Okay, yes. Well, no,
The handheld video of his cell phone.
Yes,
on
sir.
Holmes Road.
It's on Holmes Road. He's running towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
He's running, so in the first part of the video,
He's changing direction and coming towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
Mr. Arbery is running towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we see Mr. McMichael's truck at all during this time?
No, sir.
He's running at him head-on to the car?
It's more at an angle, but it looks like he's just changing directions and coming towards Mr. Bryan in the video.
Okay.
And then Mr. Bryan puts his phone down.
He puts his phone down, and then we don't have any orientation at all until he picks it back up.
Yes,
Now
and-
we see him, Mr. Arbery, running towards the McMichaels.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
At that point, I know you said you have a drone doing some mapping and all that. Do you know how far Mr. Arbery was away from Mr. McMichael's truck when that video picks up and we see him running toward the truck? Is it 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, do we know?
I don't have that information.
Do you have any information that Travis or his father at that opportunity are saying to Mr. Arbery, stop, we want to talk to you, stop, or anything like that? Stop running or whatever.
I believe Greg McMichael's statement is he was saying stop. Travis McMichael's statement, he was saying stop, get on the ground. Those commands were being given to Mr. Arbery.
And what is your understanding about why they were saying those things to Mr. Arbery?
Because they wanted to detain him and seize him
For what purpose?
so the police could come and ID him.
All right. And so in saying that, where is Travis in the video and what is he doing with his shotgun that you can see or that you believe?
Pointing it at Mr. Arbery.
So you're saying the video shows that he's pointing it straight at Mr. Arbery?
His arm is up in a shooting position is what I see. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Is there any evidence that you've been told or that you've seen where the gun is just being held down like this?
It appears that he repositions the firearm.
Yeah.
I believe it's more of a port arms. After you see Mr. Arbery change direction and going towards the passenger side.
Okay. All right. Port arms being holding the butt of the gun down and the barrel up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's not a firing position, is it?
No, sir. This was after he took the firing position.
After I understand he points and said stop, get on the ground.
Mhm.
The stop, get on the ground, where do you hear that on any kind of recording or anything like that?
That's his statement.
That's
Travis.
a statement, okay. Have you listened to the 911 call that Greg McMichael's made?
I have.
Do you hear anything on that call about stop or anything like that?
Mhm.
Okay. Say yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
This position of holding the barrel of the gun or the front of the gun down, does that have a name? I've heard the term low ready. Does that sound like something that you're familiar with?
That's not what I would call low ready.
Okay. What is low ready?
Low ready would be still in front of you but down so you could see over the top of it.
Okay. Is that a firing position or is that like a way to hold the gun safely but still holding it?
It would not be safely. It's a way so you can have full view of vision. You can pull it up in a firing position in a very quick.
Okay. But it's not pointed at somebody at that point. It's pointed down at the ground is what you're saying?
Well, its purpose is to be able to have a wider field of view so you're not looking down the sight so you can see the threat, be able to move it into a position to fire very quickly.
And I just want to make sure as you're using your pointer, are you demonstrating
Yes.
that you're pointing it down to the ground?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you see evidence of that Mr. McMichael had his gun in that position, holding it, pointing down at the ground?
I saw him up in the firing position and then I believe he moved it to where his hand's up higher like this. The video that I took.
Have you taken fingerprints of the gun? Or did the Glenn County Police take fingerprints of the shotgun
No, sir.
to try to determine where Mr. Arbery may have grabbed the gun?
No, sir.
Or whether his hand had gotten on the pump of the gun? No fingerprints were taken on the gun?
No, sir.
And I think you testified that Mr. McMichael was standing outside of his door, next to his door, until the point where Mr. Arbery changes direction and runs up the passenger side of the truck. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
You can put that back. Thank you. Is the only evidence that you have of what happens next simply comes from the video and talking with Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and Mr. Bryant?
And the body of Mr. Arbery, which has the holes in it.
There's no other cameras from any homes along Holmes Drive or anything like that?
Not that we've been able to locate, no, sir.
Okay. And so what is it that you understand Travis is thinking as he is standing at now the front of his truck as Mr. Arbery runs up the passenger side?
I'm going to object to the phrasing of the question because that would clearly call for speculation about what somebody is thinking. I don't mind them asking as a fact matter what was said about what was thinking, but that's two distinct, different questions.
I agree with that. What did Travis tell you he was thinking as Mr. Arbery came up the right side of the truck toward the front of the truck?
He didn't tell me anything.
What did he tell the Glenn County Police?
His statement to Glenn County Police was that as Mr. Aubrey was coming at him, that, again, he'd already stated that at 30 to 40 yards away, he could tell that Mr. Aubrey was going to fight. So as he saw Mr. Aubrey coming towards him, that Mr. Aubrey squared up, that he shot him. He said that he was concerned.
What does that mean, squared up?
That's the word he uses.
What did you understand it to mean?
That as he was running towards him, he squared up in like a fighting stance, or something along those lines.
And that
But-
proceeded, sorry? Your Honor, were you trying to ask something? Oh, I thought I heard Your Honor starting to speak. I thought that Travis said he perceived that he was about to be assaulted prior to shooting the first shot.
Yes, that's correct.
And did Greg McMichael or Travis say that Travis was in fact struck before the first shot was fired?
Greg McMichael said that, but his interpretation, what he's describing is actually the second shot.
But I guess the information coming from Greg McMichael is that Mr. Aubrey did in fact strike his son Travis prior to the first shot. Is that
Yes.
what he said?
He did, but he also said it was only 2 shots.
Okay, that's
And his description of where the shooting took place is on the side of the truck, not the front of the truck.
okay.
Mr. Travis McMichael said that he was not sure that if he was struck before the first shot. He said he squared up. He said we were all tangled up. He was not sure if Mr. Aubrey's hand was on his shirt when he shot him.
Did Travis tell you that when that first shot went off that Mr. Aubrey had in fact grabbed the gun prior to the shot going off?
Travis
Did
McMichael?
Travis tell you
No.
that
He didn't. Well, Glenn County Police Department, he indicated.
I apologize.
That's all right.
You know what I mean.
I do,
We
but
want to be accurate.
we want to be accurate.
Did
And
Travis tell the Glenn County Police Department that Mr. Aubrey had placed his hands on the gun prior to him shooting it the first time?
no, I believe he did not say that the hand was on the gun before he shot.
Just that Mr. Aubrey was squared up, ready to fight,
And he
and may
said
have grabbed him.
and may have grabbed him. It says may have hit him. He was not sure about that. He was very inconsistent about what occurred during that time frame because he said his adrenaline was pumping and it happened very quickly.
Did he say that he was afraid of being beat or assaulted by Mr. Aubrey?
He said he was afraid that Mr. Aubrey would get hold of the shotgun. Yes, sir.
Does the video give you, you said you had some work done to the video to slow it down. In doing that work, are you able to determine where Travis was in front of the car and where Mr. Aubrey was in front of the car, whether it was the front right bumper headlight area or the middle area or further to the left? Can you make any determination about that?
Just that it's in the front of the truck. No, sir.
Okay.
Not more specific. than that.
And did the Glenn County Police Department photograph the front of the truck or look to find blood or anything like that at the time they were investigating on the 23rd?
They photographed the scene, which included the truck in the pictures. Yes, sir.
Anything about those photographs lend any information about where they may have been when the first shot was fired?
Not that I can interpret. No, sir.
And it's your belief that the first shot was fired was one of the shots to the chest, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you believe that because Travis said that he thought that was the first shot as well?
And the video after the first shot, when Mr. Aubrey comes in the frame, he's got blood on the front of his shirt.
Okay, you've been able to determine that through the work that you've done with the video.
Yes.
And then I think you testified that you can then see Mr. Arbery hitting Mr. McMichael and grabbing for the gun.
Yes, sir.
And sort of shoving him back across the street out of view.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Is that distance of that movement by Mr. Arbery kind of overpowering Mr. McMichael back across the street? Have you calculated how far he had to push him to get him out of view?
I don't think I would say it was an overpowering. I think Travis McMichael said he started retreating backwards.
Trying to get away.
From, yes, sir.
Okay.
After
And
he shot.
After he shot him, that's right.
Right.
At that time, did he say that Mr. Arbery had his hands on the gun and was trying to take the gun from him?
He said he had his hands on the gun, yes, sir. I don't know if he specifically was trying to pull the gun away or not, but he indicated that he did have his hands on the gun.
And did Travis tell you that the second shot came because he was trying to defend himself from what he said was the assault of Mr. Arbery onto him at that point?
That's what he told Glenn County Police
So
Department.
he told Glenn County. And the third shot, the same thing, he was still trying to get the gun away from Mr. Arbery, and he shot because Mr. Arbery kept coming at him,
Yes.
essentially. Okay. And it's your decision then, as you move forward through the case, that you are of the opinion that this was not self-defense by Mr. McMichael.
I don't believe it was self-defense by Mr. McMichael. I believe it was self-defense by Mr. Aubrey.
Okay, that's why you took the warrants the way you took the warrants.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I believe Mr. Aubrey was being pursued, and he ran till he couldn't run anymore, and it was turning back to a man with a shotgun, or fight with his bare hands against a man with a shotgun, and he chose to fight.
And not to run through a side yard or not to run through another yard or anything like that.
I think his thing was to, I believe Mr. Aubrey's decision was to just try to get away. And when he felt like he could not escape, he chose to fight.
But it is clear from the investigation that for the driving and the interactions that took place all around that area, that no shot was fired at any time by anybody prior to the hand-to-hand combat that Mr. Arbery and Mr. McMichael engaged in.
That's what the evidence
That's
so
what
far
the evidence
shows.
shows so far.
Yes.
Okay. It's going to take me just a second to move through my notes to make sure I haven't missed questions. I'm going to try to conclude here momentarily. Has there been any effort on your part of the Glenn County Police Department to also seize Mr. Arbery's cell phone to do some testing or looking on his phone?
I did. I explored that option. At the time of the shooting incident, Mr. Aubrey did not have a cell phone. It had been broken. Apparently, according to his family, during his runs, he would often drop his cell phone and they would break. And the last time he's broke it, his mother said, "I'm not buying you another phone if you're going to continue to break them while you're running."
In investigating, I'm going to go back and pick up a couple of things that may be a little out of order.
Okay.
In investigating the incidences that were ongoing in the Satilla Shores neighborhood, there was an incident on January 1st, 2020, where a car was broken into that was not Mr. McMichael's car. It was another car where another gun had been stolen. Are you aware of that?
I am not, no, sir.
Where the fingerprints were taken from that car?
I am not aware of that, no, sir.
Did you become aware of Officer Rash's involvement with the Glenn County Police Department, or speak to him about, or have one of your agents speak to him about his trying to assist the Satilla Shores neighborhood with the burglaries and break-ins?
I did, yes. Or I had one of my agents interview him, yes, sir.
Okay. Did you learn anything from him that you felt was concerning about the neighbors' efforts or the McMichael's efforts to solve the crime issue in their neighborhood?
I don't guess I understand your question.
What did you learn from him? Let's keep it simple.
I believe he had written a report. I believe his statement to the agent was that he was familiar with the ongoing trespassing issue, that Greg McMichael he had interacted with Greg McMichael. Greg McMichael had told him to pass along a message to Ware English that if he saw the guy in the house again, that he could always call Greg McMichael and provide his number. So Officer Rash did that.
So Officer Rash encouraged Larry English to call Greg McMichael?
No, sir. Officer Rash said he was just passing along the message, was his interpretation. Mr. English, though, did not see the message until after the shooting incident had occurred. He just had missed the text messages that had come through, apparently, according to his statement.
Okay. the warrants that you took for Mr. Travis McMichael.
Counsel, this is your last question until we take a lunch break.
Yes, sir, this is the end. Thank you, Judge. Well, maybe more than one question, but this was the end. I'm just going to ask him about the warrants he took.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The warrants that you took, one was for aggravated assault. The basis, the factual basis of the aggravated assault, what are the specific facts that we've discussed that you are saying this is the aggravated assault, that is the aggravated assault here of this count of warrant?
My specific fact that I based the warrant on and I provided it would be that the aggravated assault occurred when Travis McMichael pointed a 12-gauge Remington 870 shotgun at Ahmaud Aubrey.
Okay, when he pointed the firearm, and you described that as when he was standing next to his truck and Mr. Aubrey was running towards him and he held the gun up like this when he was saying stop and get down?
That is one instance, and then Travis McMichael indicates that he was pointing the shotgun at Ahmaud Aubrey as he was approaching him at the front of the truck as well.
Okay, and that would be the basis of the aggravated assault?
That's correct.
Pointing of the firearm as he was running towards him and he was yelling stop, or when he came around the front of the truck at him and he pointed the gun at him after he came around the front of the truck at Travis?
That's correct. After Travis went around the front of the truck, yes, sir, that's
and
correct.
Mr. Aubrey came around the front of the
That's
truck
correct.
at Travis, Travis points the gun, that's the aggravated assault at that moment.
And when Mr. Aubrey was 30 to 40 yards away and Travis was pointing as well.
Okay, so now we have a distance, so 30 or 40 yards
That's
away.
that's according to Travis McMichael's
Fair.
statement.
Fair. And at the same time, he was 30, 40 yards away, Travis was saying stop, stop, get on the ground.
That's my understanding from his statement.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
And then the document that you created simply states that the offense being described as the accused pointed and discharged a shotgun, which is a deadly weapon capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, at Ahmaud Aubrey. This statement is the sum total of what you presented to the signing magistrate. Is that correct?
That's presented to a Superior Court judge and no offered oral testimony in reference to this case.
So you're saying you actually gave oral testimony in addition to what you made in your affidavit?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And where is that oral testimony reflected? Is it been written down now? Is it on a document?
No, sir, I provided it to the judge.
The judge himself, if he were sitting in this witness stand, would say, yes, I got additional information outside of the four corners of this document.
I'm sure he would, yes, sir.
You sure would? Okay. Now, moving to the felony murder that caused the death of, obviously, Mr. Aubrey was shot and killed on that day. And so
Yes.
the basis is what exactly? That he was shot and killed that day?
During the commission of a felony, 2-wit aggravated assault.
And it being the pointing of the gun as he was approaching and the pointing of him as he came around the front of the car.
That's correct, yes, sir.
I don't have anything further. I appreciate your patience with me.
All right, we'll be in recess until 2:15.
Thank you.
All rise.